this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, The Case of Lucy Letby, we unpack the story of an unimaginable tragedy that gripped the UK in 2023. But what if we didn't get the whole story?
Evidence has been made to fit.
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapsed.
What if the truth was disguised by a story we chose to believe?
Oh my God, I think she might be innocent.
Listen to Doubt, The Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, it's Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And today I'm talking with my dear friend, Krista Williams.
It can change you in the best way possible. Dance with the change, dance with the breakdowns.
The embodiment of Pisces intuition with Capricorn power moves.
So I'm like delusionally proud of my chart.
Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
In 2018, the FBI took down a ring of spies working for China's Ministry of State Security, one of the most mysterious intelligence agencies in the world.
The Sixth Bureau podcast is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the Sixth Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd. In 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
But here's the thing. Bachelor fans hated him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
That's when his life took a disturbing turn. A one-night stand would end in a courtroom.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions. If I know one thing about diseases, it's that they're homebodies.
No, it's fine. We make it.
They just want to Netflix and chill.
We just line up the entire population of the U.S. in a line across the U.S. and we shoot any deer that tries to cross the line.
I think we should do the reverse and have deer shoot people who try to cross the line. It's the only thing that can protect us from the dangerous East.
No. Look. Well, I guess it works in the East. In the West, we have to maintain the right to arm bears.
Yep. I'm of the opinion, given how dry it is in New Mexico, that we need to sink every part of the country east of New Mexico to give it a coast that can keep it moist.
I wonder how much of this is going to get in the final cut.
Well, if you live east of New Mexico, welcome to the ocean. That's my suggestion. Speaking of people east of New Mexico, This Is It Could Happen Here, a podcast where some of the listeners are east of New Mexico, even though I don't recommend that. I'm Robert Evans. On the call with me is Christopher Wong, Garrison Davis, Shireen Lonnie Yunus, and then our producer, Sophie. Today, we're talking about terrorism.
Cute.
We can do it in a little NPR voice. So, recently, the same week as the Supreme Court leaked a document stating that they would be taking out Roe v. Wade and ushering in an era of theocratic fascism in a number of states. An individual or individuals unknown in Wisconsin attacked an anti-choice headquarters building with a Molotov cocktail and spray-painted graffiti on the side saying, if abortion isn't safe, then you aren't either. That same group, or individuals claiming to be from them, later reached out to me through an intermediary and sent a manifesto of sorts about the attack, promising follow-up attacks within 30 days.
But they wrote in cursive. So
they did write
who can say if this actually happened?
So we'll talk first. I'm going to just go over first what happened in like factual terms, and then we'll talk about the discourse around it. So basically, there's this attack on this anti-choice like advocacy organization's headquarters in fucking Wisconsin. it seemed to be a pretty good Molotov, in that, like, Garrison, you and I have watched a number of people fail to properly utilize Molotov
I've watched
cocktails.
a few people get ignited by Molotovs.
Yeah.
I've watched
it is
one
easy
cop
to
get
fuck
ignited.
up.
I've
Yeah.
watched one not cop get ignited by a Molotov.
Yeah. I've seen a couple not cops get ignited by Molotovs.
Yeah.
They're not, like, people can fuck them up easily. Whoever did this did not fuck them up. It was seemed to be, at the moment, no one has been arrested. Now, it's possible by the time this drops, Wisconsin police will be like, oh no, there was totally surveillance footage and they fucked up and we just caught them. But at the moment, it doesn't look like that's the case. So it looks like this is somebody who carried out, or some buddies, because it's entirely possible it's multiple people, but carried out a very effective, like, action that did material damage to part of kind of the physical infrastructure of the anti-choice movement, and ended without anyone getting caught. So that's the fact of the actual attack itself. A person who claiming to be affiliated with the individuals or group who did this reached out to a source of mine who I'm keeping anonymous, but somebody who I've known for a while with a very good track record of being accurate, and said, hey, these individuals have a communique they would like put out. And I was sent an Anon Files link, which is a link, if you view it in a normal browser, you'll get some fucked up shit. Don't put it in a normal browser. I specified it's like you're supposed to, if you put it in Tor, it will download a text file, right? And the text file is the communique. So using the Tor browser for that link, you can get a text file in which they lay out, number one, they name themselves, and the name they've chosen for their group is Jane's Revenge, which is a reference to the Jane Collective, which was a pro-choice group in the late 60s, early 70s that provided women with access to contraception and abortion illegally. A bunch of them went to jail. They were pardoned after Roe v. Wade, if I'm not mistaken, or at least
if
otherwise
you want to know more
got
about
out.
it, listen to Margaret Killjoy's Cool People
Yeah.
Do Cool Stuff two-parter on the Jane Collective.
Yeah, very well timed. So they're calling themselves Jane's Revenge, and they basically said, hey, if you are an organization in the anti-choice movement, you have 30 days to close down your operations. Otherwise, there will be follow-up attacks. They specifically noted the long, and it's at this point like a 40 years long history of terrorist attacks from the anti-choice movement, many of which have assassinated doctors. Something like 16 people have been killed. Dozens of bombs and bombing attempts, something like 100 acid attacks. So they made a note of all that and said that, like, basically we will be responding in kind, and attacks after this initial attack will be correspondingly more severe. They also claimed to have a pretty wide geographic reach, said they had folks in a number of cities, and that, yeah, there's going to be follow-up attacks, and they're prepared to defend their bodily autonomy with violence. So that's the gist of what was claimed in the communique. In terms of what I think about its legitimacy, I don't have any reason to believe they're not representing the individual or individuals who carried out that attack in Wisconsin, based on the timing of when the communique was made and based on the fact that the communique is pretty consistent with what we saw from the actual action, right? So among other things, what you can tell from the physical action that was taken is that the individual or individuals who did this were pretty well organized. They carried out a competent action, and they thought there was a value in very clear messaging, because there's clear messaging surrounding the attack. The communique is very clear messaging. It does not sound like a right-winger writing up a fake communique. It's very it takes great pains to both connect itself to history, to frame its violence within the context of the violence perpetuated by the anti-choice movement for decades. And just in general, the communique seems consistent with the action that we saw in Wisconsin. Now, I cannot say to a statement of certainty whether or not it's legitimate. One helpful thing they did is state that there would be more attacks in 30 days. So we're kind of waiting. If 30 days pass and there's never any kind of follow-up attacks by this group, then we can probably assume that this was either somebody bullshitting or that the heat got too much for them and they decided not to carry out follow-up attacks. But we're all kind of in this holding pattern now to see what happens. My personal speculation is that They were exaggerating a number of things. I think that their claims about having members in a number of states and a capacity to strike in a number of states was more aspirational than literal, in that I suspect the people behind this attack and this communique are hoping that by carrying out attacks, they can inspire other people to carry out attacks and credit it to the same organization, right?
Yes.
Which is not an uncommon tactic in the history of terrorism. And again, this is terrorism. Like, that doesn't mean I don't think they have a point or that it's like fundamentally unjust. Terrorism is just like a set of tactics that different groups can use, and it can be ethical or unethical depending on how you choose to do that. You can attack purely infrastructure in a terrorist manner, and I don't think that's necessarily unethical. And you can also attack civilians in a terrorist manner, and I think that is unethical. At this moment, these people have not done anything I view as inherently unethical. They burned a building, which I think is often justified and is in this case justified. So that's my opinion on the matter. Let's open it up.
On the point you kind of closed with, I mean, yeah, they showed effective direct action. They did a physical thing. Now, Molotovs are not the best way to do to arson a building, but they are good for a very quick attack. It caused this whole media thing, right? There's a lot of people talking about it, then releasing the communique through someone who can give it a lot of visibility, and then by doing it with this name, Jane's Revenge, and saying in 30 days there will be more attacks in different cities, the message is that you can. One way to look at this is if they don't have tons of members or allies that they know across different cities, is that anyone can do this. Like, anyone can do this and call themselves by that name and be a part of this larger thing. Like, it's if you spread it around, then that it can become like this thing that anyone can glom onto. It doesn't need to be. You don't need to be a part of a member of a specific group. You can just do stuff and release communiques safely and add on to the specter.
Yeah, it's not hard to set up like a text drop in the same manner that they did. It is relatively secure. Like, there's no perfect, if you are committing terrorism, there is no perfect manner to issue a statement. But of the different things they could have chosen, this is relatively secure, especially doing it through an intermediary. I haven't had direct contact with these people, but we should probably note that there's a huge discourse that started before the communique came out, arguing that this is like a false flag attack.
Yeah, yes. In a long line of calling pretty well planned out direct action, when it actually happens, people will default to calling it an op or calling it a false flag. From a variety of people, like there's libs who say, "Oh, this is a staged thing to make our movement look bad." There's tankies who think it's like the CIA planning something. There's random other folks who are like, "I don't know if it's legit. I think maybe it's like some." It's a lot of people get various justifications for calling pretty effective acts of direct action. And in questioning their legitimacy.
I think some of this comes from, because there's the bad faith elements of this, but I think the good faith folks who question it, there's a lot of learned helplessness there. This idea that because somebody did carry out a pretty successful direct action attack that kind of did what its intention was, then it has to have been the FBI or whoever, right? Because obviously the left could never have pulled off something as cunning as throwing a single Molotov at a building and spray painting the side of it, And I do think that that's a problem, whether or not you think the solution to issues like the right-wing attack on reproductive health care come from direct action. The fact that folks almost can't conceive of effective action being taken by the left without the feds being involved is really an issue.
Yeah, and this was a huge thing during 2020. Like, one of the things that we saw, there were so many just weird conspiracy theories, and then the other thing that happened very quickly was people became convinced almost immediately that anyone doing anything was a Fed or an infiltrator, and you got crowds turning people over to police. You got people on Twitter like trying to track down like who was throwing Molotovs in videos, and like one of the people they caught and they turned over to the police, it turned out had been the girlfriend of someone who got killed by the cops.
Yep.
And so I mean this stuff has real world consequences. It has already like sent people to jail. It has it has this enormous demobilizing effect. I mean, I don't remember people. Two people remember the two big 2020 the two big Twitter conspiracies were
bricks and who's dropping off the bricks at the protest.
Yeah. There was this whole thing that people would see a pallet
famous
of bricks
thing
and they were
never
like, oh my
seen
God.
in a major
right
American
next to
city. Bricks.
Right next to a construction site. They'll be like, how are all these pallets of bricks showing up? There's like a construction site a block away. You're like, okay. Yeah. Who's distributing the fireworks? How do these fireworks get here?
Well,
Never mind, it's June 29th.
If you look at the history of like the FBI, some people will mistakenly like throw the CIA in there. The CIA doesn't really tend to do like the domestic fuckery. Their international fuckery. But like if you look at the history of the FBI fucking with left-wing social movements, it's not by handing out brick pallets.
Yeah.
like that's not what they do. We have a lot of documentation about what they do, and it's not bricks.
And if there is some secret group who's maliciously giving out bricks so people attack, throw them through windows or throw them at cop cars, like, who cares? Bricks are getting thrown at cop cars. It doesn't matter where they come from. People are still choosing to do action.
Yeah, the best example of this is the Russian Revolution in 1905. The Russian Revolution of 1905 was started by a guy who was a police agent. Like his whole thing is he was working to create like unions that could be controlled by the state, and he marched a bunch of people into a square and the police shot them, and that's literally how the Russian Revolution started. Like there's a point. Okay, there's two layers of this. One is that like there almost is never a conspiracy going on, and two, if the conspiracy is we want to push people towards doing things, it doesn't. There's a point at which it stops mattering because
a lot of people forget about Occam's razor when they're talking about these types of things. Usually, the more simple the answer, the more likely it is. The less involved parties, the more likely it is. So if there's a choice between rad people fucking up an anti-choice headquarters versus a government conspiracy to do false flag operations to make the anti-choice to make the abortion movement look bad, like one of those is much more simple and much more likely, and it's people just deciding to do stuff. Because guess what, you can actually do that. You don't need to rely on these weird narratives to justify your uncomfortableness at forms of radical direct action, because it's people use that false flag idea so they don't need to actually engage with what direct action will mean, and if it is someone's moral imperative to physically attack like physical manifestations of these sources of oppression.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. I think one of the things that's most frustrating to me about this is It kind of suggests that a sizable chunk of people who ostensibly consider themselves on the left are like focusing their time not on doing anything and not on taking any action to materially change the conditions they're angry at, but are instead looking for reasons to disavow other folks on the left, and that's like the primary. Which is, if you like look at what we know Herbert Hoover was saying about the FBI's COINTELPRO program was the goal of COINTELPRO, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm just like, I feel like this promotes, I don't know, a morality like race or like just like competition where the only thing it does is just promote infighting when you have this, like, you're on your morality horse. But I think if you actually support real change, you have to come to terms with, like, you have to do illegal things. And, like, holding on to, like, these made-up laws that someone made up about, like, how to achieve change is useless. And there's, I mean, like, dividing up a side that's supposed to be going for the same thing, like that's it's just, it's missing the whole point, and people don't
If you look at the right, you've got all these folks who were like legal and whatnot proponents of ending reproductive healthcare access, and then you have the folks who were doing repeated acts of terrorism. And the folks who were on the legal side of things didn't disavow those people. They were often affiliated with churches that did shit like auction off the possessions of like extremists who had murdered doctors and shit. Yep. Like they were like, even the most they would do is just not directly talk about those people. They didn't disavow them. They didn't like attack it because they understood that a diversity of tactics was going to be how they achieved their goals, that it was a mix of pushing for these legal changes and carrying out so many terroristic attacks that it frightened people away from supporting abortion service providers and other kind of reproductive healthcare service providers.
I think that's like the biggest difference between the right and the left, though. Like Republicans are really good at uniting on this big picture, and I feel like Democrats are not. I feel like they just, I don't know. There's too much infighting, and that's why it's always fractured.
Part of it is that on the Republican side, you have Republicans and you have the far right who are also Republicans. And even though a lot of folks on the far right bitch about the centrists in their like the folks who are closer to the center, they all get in line for really radical stuff. Like the center of the Republican Party always yields to the radicals, whereas Democrats do not acknowledge leftists as having anything to do with the Democratic Party or Democratic politics, other than to yell at them when they don't vote. And on the other hand of things, there's a lot of folks on the left who hate liberals more than they hate fascists, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
And it's I think one of those is a bigger problem than the other. I think the failure of the Democratic establishment to like deal with the left at all, or make any kind of progress that could be seen as actually left wing is
be a left-wing
much
party.
more of the problem.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
there are structural reasons for that too, which is okay. If you look at like what is the basis of conservative alliance, right? If you're a conservative, you know, okay, if you're from the sort of like moderate business wing of the party, if you're from the fascist wing of the party, right? You can have one judge who gives both of you the things that you want, right? Because if you're like the Koch brothers, the thing that you want is deregulation, right? You want to be able to just like dump poison into the environment. If you're an evangelical, the thing that you want is no one can ever have an abortion again. And you know, if you're like a fascist, I don't know, maybe you want like we don't give food to immigrant children anymore, so they starve to death. And one judge can give you all of those same things. Because the sort of the class and social issues of the Republican base can all be fused together without harming each other. But the problem with the Democratic Party is that like the Democratic Party's basis is like what's left of the union movement, but then also like a bunch of corporations and banks and like weapons manufacturers and stuff, but then also like a bunch of angry students and also like a bunch of people from different minority groups, and all of these people like have different interests. And you know, in the Democratic Party, ultimately, like the thing that they care about is keeping capitalism going. And you know, if they have to like, if that means that, yeah, I mean, well, okay, if your thing is you want to keep capitalism going, like of course you're just going to throw your left wing out to the wolves, right? Like it makes sense for them to do this because the part of their base that actually matters isn't like the labor movement. It's like it's Goldman Sachs. I think that one of the other things that causes people to have this like immediately anytime someone does like people remember like when Nancy Pelosi's driveway got graffitied.
Oh yeah.
With like
now see
name.
That was like that's never that's horrible. Don't graffiti Nancy Pelosi's driveway. That's evil.
Yeah, like
that's an ISIS. You did an ISIS there.
Yeah, everyone lost their mind and was like, "Oh, this is obviously a false flag." And it's like, what, you know? But the reason they do this is because they have like Democrat optics brain, where like instead of anything being about politics, everything is just about optics and optics. How does it look? How does it look? How does it look? And like, the only people who care about this are like weird pundits. But because everyone's so sort of absorbed in like the Twitter media sphere, like they think that like the actual general public cares about the things that pundits care about because the only thing they're seeing is pundits writing angry articles about it. Like nobody cared. Like zero people.
Especially the graffiti thing, because man, people will like dissect how someone sprayed an anarchist A.
Yeah.
And it's like
if you're not aware, like a big chunk of the discourse, re it being a false flag or whatever, was that
they spray painted
graffiti
in
had
cursive.
been spray painted. Yeah.
And that they did like the Anarchy A inside the circle, and it's wild because spray painting what they said, like if abortions aren't safe then you aren't either, in cursive is a genius move. It's great because if you spray paint it in some like random punk font, that's easy to be ignored. You're like, oh, it's just people doing like whatever, people spray painting stuff. But doing it like methodically in cursive is actually a really good choice because you're like, oh, it's like we're dealing with adults. It's like the type of things that people will go through their minds when they look at it is great. And it's just a weird denial to assume that no one who takes radical direct action would ever write in cursive. It's just the most brainworms thing.
And it's also very clear like okay, so I am very bad at spray painting, right? But like I have used a spray paint can. And because
allegedly.
I have used a spray paint, well, this isn't alleged. I was making banners for stuff. So this wasn't even this wasn't even crying spray. This is just like regular spray painting. It's like that is hard. Like writing that in cursive and having it look that nice with the spray paint can is like difficult. Which, if you think about this for about 5 seconds, this makes it more likely that it's actually leftists doing this because it's like, what? Okay, hold on. So the anti-abortion people have one person who's really, really good at graffiti. And this is the person that they've assigned. Yeah, they
sent him to the anarchist school in secret
to like learn. It's like it's nonsense, but it's like people want everything to sort of like, and I think this is the other angle of this is that people think that like have this wild overassessment of the capacity of the state.
Yeah,
and they think that anytime something looks slightly weird, it's like, oh, it must be the state. Like one of the things that happened with the Brooklyn shooting too was like. You had all these people. There was this tweet going around that was like, "Oh, the cameras just happened. All the cameras in New York were working except the exact one that would have caught the shooter." And this is like everyone circled around this, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is a false flag." And then no, it turned out that like the guy had literally called the police, but the police were so incompetent that like other people like saw him on the street and got to him before like the cops did, and the camera, it turned out, wasn't even like the camera that was out wasn't even the camera that like they had him on camera. It was a different camera, but it was like everyone just immediately has this like conspiracy brain thing where they see like one thing out of context that looks slightly weird. And they go, "Oh my god, this whole thing is a state like CIA false flag
it's
cover
so depressing. It's so depressing because it's so depowering. You're specific. You're like it ties into the learned helplessness thing that Robert mentioned. Like you're convincing yourself that we don't have power to change things, that we cannot take any physical action to change things, and that's a not great mentality to have if you want to improve the world. If you want to destroy the things that harm you. You don't want to fall into that specific like I don't have any power mindset because turns out you can do stuff. Things happen. You can. People threw a Molotov and broke windows and did graffiti.
Shall
for
we
the
say
center.
cool people sometimes do cool things?
Yes, just like the name of the podcast. Do people
stuff?
If
Yes.
you're gonna plug the show, plug the show.
Sophie.
That's my
Sophie.
name.
Sophie. One of the things that's interesting to me, and it might hold some lessons for folks thinking about radical direct action and what gets attention and what doesn't. So obviously, this attack has garnered a lot of national attention, right? The fact that, and I think it's because there was both an attack and a message. There was another attack, and it's not 100% that this had anything to do with the pro-choice movement, but I suspect it does. The Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares, on the 10th of May, there was someone shot into his office. Like a bullet was found in the office. It was probably fired when no one was there. We don't really know more than that. It is unclear as to whether or not this is involved with things. But 3 days before the shot was fired into his office, he had basically Catholic groups had been planning big masses to celebrate the leaked draft opinion, and protesters had been organizing to protest the Catholic masses, and he had threatened to charge people who protested masses because he believes the right to freedom of religion trumps the right of free speech. So it was kind of like a fucked up situation. People got angry at Miyares, and it seems kind of noteworthy that someone shot into his office 3 days after this.
there's been a lot of stuff. I mean, like on May 8th, there was an attack on the Oregon Right to Life building.
Yes, which was certainly a pro-choice.
There was at least 2 Molotov cocktails thrown, and there was a break-in inside. So it's like you can do things. You don't have no power. Like you can interact with politics in a physical way.
People do interact with politics in a physical way.
And people have this assumption that like this is going to be incredibly unpopular. And again, I want to point out, burning the 3rd precinct had a higher approval rating than both presidential candidates.
I again tend to advocate in 2024 we should elect the burning of the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis as president.
Yeah. Look, the way that works is the burning of the precinct takes office, and then every day you burn another precinct. So that you can actually have a president.
Well, that is how you fill the cabinet. There needs to
that too. You have to. Well, all the staff positions filled with different
all the staff positions.
The health and human services secretary will be the West Los Angeles police station and so forth. Yes,
I'm real excited to see which one gets picked for the housing secretary. I'm just on my toes.
It's exciting. It's exciting. Democracy can be quite fun.
Electoralism has some really cool points.
Hey, you too could go in front of the National Labor Relations Board, and the National Labor Relations Board is just 7 on fire police stations.
Yeah, charred
you will
bricks.
Win.
So we wanted to at least talk about this because whenever a cool thing happens and a large swath of people who are ostensibly leftists or even anarchists default to calling anything cool a false flag or an op. It's like, well, like, what do you want? Like, do you want people just to stay at home all the time and not do anything? Like, what's the end goal here? If you're calling everything that happens an op.
Yeah, and also just like if you're worried about ops and thinking of suggesting that something might be, what is your line? Is it just that people broke a law? Are you saying that if people do illegal things, that's always like a government op? Because that doesn't seem like, if you call yourself an anarchist, that doesn't seem like a good strategy.
Well, I mean, especially when it comes to reproductive rights, like you're going to have to do illegal things if
people are going to have to break a shit. Exactly,
Shireen. So it's like very pick and choose. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 100% convinced that like all of these people, if they'd seen John Brown, would have been completely convinced that John Brown was
John Brown was for sure the FBI. He founded it. The original op, John Brown.
I think there's an aspect there of also like, okay, if you're on Twitter, right, mostly you're not doing politics, and the thing that you're actually doing on Twitter is trying to feel smarter than everyone else. And if you're the person that's like, oh, hey, look, all these sheeple believe that this thing wasn't an op, or like, oh, all these people believe. Yeah, it's like yeah, okay, you very quickly like spiral into just like all the sheeple who are
a smart person finds this suspicious.
It's like,
you're like,
yeah, and it's just a bad like. Looking at an element of event and going, oh, this is weird, but in a way that is, oh, isn't this weird? It must be the government. Like that's just a bad way of thinking.
Like
of things.
in the mere hours, in the mere minutes after anonymous people broke into the Portland Police Association headquarters back in, I think, was July of 2020. Just in mere hours, people were calling it a false flag, that the police were dressed up as Black Bloc, breaking into their own building. The feds.
They said the people had started protesting the feds. Yes, they alleged that this was like, I guess, the FBI or Homeland Security trying to get protesters angry at the cops again, which is, I mean, for one thing, if that ever would actually happen,
that sounds great.
if there were to be a point where the left wing had the FBI fighting, or the FBI or Homeland Security, whatever, fighting with local police over who was getting protested, that's a win. That's a big, solid capital dub for the.
But no, people
for
thinking
the team.
Like the FBI is in block breaking into the police union building and trying to light it on fire. You're like, well,
yeah, doing less physical. Let's be honest, doing less damage to that police union building than I have seen my friends do when attempting to deep fry French fries. Like, I have watched people do more damage to their living rooms than that protest did to the PBA.
But it's just astonishing because like there was so many people at that action and so many people using the moment moment to actually gain like physical political power for a brief moment, and to take that away from them is just a bizarre impulse, and I would like to see it end, especially as we're going to hopefully see that people will realize that direct action is going to become more and more important for securing your personal rights and securing your personal freedom.
Yeah. Well, and also, I would say to these people, okay, if you want to be completely sure that something is happening, it's not an op, do it yourself. Stop yelling about it on Twitter. Look, do it yourself. Then you'll know it's not an op.
As a general rule, look at France. What do the French do whenever something they consider a right gets taken away from them? They burn downtown Paris down. They light banks on fire. Paris, everyone who gets elected to a position of power in France knows that if they cross certain lines, the capital will be ungovernable. And there's a reason why French people have such quality healthcare.
Well, with that note, I mean, I can't believe we're ending on the note. Be like the French. I just can't. Look,
the French have made a lot of good calls, a lot of bad ones too. Not trying to whitewash France, but there's a number of things they got spot on.
So anyway, we will be counting down the days until that 30-day marker, and who knows? Maybe other attacks will happen with people also calling themselves Jane's Revenge, because...
And obviously, this is something that we as journalists have no opinion on one way or the other. We're just reporting. Just pure reporting.
Anyway, listen to cool people who did cool stuff to hear about the Jane Collective.
Yeah, and maybe also recreationally read about what different civilian groups are doing in Ukraine and the degree to which a wide variety of incredibly available tools can be repurposed in neat ways.
All right, I think that's the sode.
That's a good sode.
That's the sode.
Hi, this is Joe Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal. Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the 6th Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to It Could Happen Here, and it continues to happen here. I'm Robert Evans. This is a podcast about things falling apart and what to do after that happens. And we are all currently dealing with the falling apart of several decades of progress on reproductive justice, the Supreme Court leaking that they are coming for Roe v. Wade. And today I'm here with Christopher Wong and Shireen Lani Yunus and my producer, Sophie. We have two guests from the Bridget Alliance and the Midwest Access Coalition. We're going to talk more about what they do in a second. Broadly speaking, both seek to attach people who are looking for reproductive health care and abortion access, but cannot get it easily in their area with clinics and the things that they need in order to get to the clinics, including transit and, time in hotels, whatnot, in order to make it easier to get access to that kind of healthcare in places like the Midwest, where folks have been spending decades making it much more difficult, even prior to this recent ruling, to get that kind of healthcare. So I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. You've got the floor.
Well, hi, I am Odile Shalit. I am the executive director at the Bridget Alliance, and I'm going to introduce my counterpart here.
I'm Diana Parker Kafka. I'm the executive director of the Midwest Access Coalition.
And so y'all have been, in some ways, kind of dealing with elements of the post-Roe world, because obviously, we're all focused on this Supreme Court decision that's in the pipeline, but anti-choice activists have been working very hard to essentially create a post-Roe world in chunks of the United States prior to this point. So y'all have been kind of dealing with the reality that a larger number of people are going to be living under for a while, right?
Yes. Yeah, Missouri has been able to effectively ban abortion in its state for years now. I think there's maybe a handful of abortions that the one clinic there are able to do because of all of the TRAP laws, which is the targeted restrictions for abortion providers, and the waiting period. So people have to go to another state, Kansas, Iowa, or Illinois for Missouri. And we've been helping those folks for years.
And I'm going to guess this, just because you've been living with this for a while, I'm going to guess the announcement last week did not come as a total surprise.
The timing of it certainly did, which for Diana and I came at the heels of a conference that we were at, thankfully together, which was kind of just pure luck for us, so we could actually commiserate together. But no, ultimately, this is not a huge surprise. I think we're all still waiting to see what actually happens in June, but the writing has been on the wall for months and years, if not longer. And, as you were just pointing it out, essentially for organizations like the Bridget Alliance and the Midwest Access Coalition, we have been existing already because the protections of Roe are insufficient to actually secure abortion access for all in this country. So this has been our lived experience, and preparing for this moment has been a long time coming.
And I'm sure there have been a number of conversations that have been going on about what to do and how to prepare for this, right? Because the primary change is going to be, at least initially, until they make some sort of federal push, that states that have some sort of functional access to abortion are going to be flooded with an even higher number of people in need of care. Could you kind of walk us through what sort of steps have been taken in order to kind of brace for that impact, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things, and the first, to sort of pull back on that for a second, is to say that part of preparing for what's to come has been our orgs and the community that we exist in, this incredible expansive landscape of different types of organizations that have existed for decades to secure abortion access, where the laws were insufficient, where people were faced with barriers like income inequity and geographic inequity and the unavailability of providers. This network, though, has existed largely unseen. And so a lot of preparing for what is to come is really embracing our existence, feeling affirmed in that and in our value, not shying away from the expertise within this community, which is held both by volunteers as well as staff. And so I think a lot of the last couple of years has been focusing on really trying to harness that expertise and that knowledge and compassion, and the fact that many of the people who are leading a lot of the efforts in the reproductive justice movement are people who have had abortions themselves, which is a enormous and valuable part of how this movement moves, and hopefully will continue to center the people most impacted by the fall of Roe. I think more specifically for Bridget and orgs like MAC, preparation means deepening our relationships with the clinics that we work with. They are critical, of course, and their sanity is critical to abortion access, is making sure that we have the sufficient funding to continue to staff, train, vet volunteers systematically and mindfully. And ideally do so in a sustainable way so that we're not all overwhelming ourselves with the sudden surge of need and the sudden surge of impact. And then, for Diana and I, even personally, it means deepening the relationships that us practical support organizations have with one another, because no one organization is going to be able to help every single abortion seeker who will need to travel. It will rely upon really strong and transparent collaboration. So those are some of the things that we've been focusing on.
One of the things that strikes me as a problem that's going to be, if not immediate, then pretty imminent for y'all is we've already seen threats and promises from legislators in some states to attempt to criminalize leaving a state where abortion is illegal in order to get access to health care. What kind of preparation is even possible for that sort of world? Because it does seem like we're staring down the barrel of that.
Yeah, I think the only preparation we can have right now is to expect that the courts will allow them to do that. They're very creative now that they've seen SB 8 go into effect and hold on as the law of the land, even though it's in direct violation of federal law. SCOTUS, the highest court of our country, is the one that has been allowing that to happen. And so that sends a huge message to all these forced birth legislators that, bring us your worst take on the law. We will find a way to let you keep it. We're working with you on this, and you just need to get bolder and bolder and see what you can get away with. So we can't really predict how they're going to do that, although Missouri has indicated that they're going to consider an egg as soon as it's fertilized a resident and a resident of the state that they have, responsibility for protecting, completely ignoring the fact that it's growing inside a complete human being that has rights. But that's the latest that I've heard of them figuring out how to restrict someone's travel. But it would require a significant shift in how we understand constitutional law and the basis for our legal system.
Yeah, and that seems like something that, I don't know, like really genuinely seems to be on the table in this moment. I mean, we have, I think it's Louisiana who's trying to, like, part of their bill is that they, like, literally it says that they can disobey the federal government, which we had a civil war about that. We had a nullification crisis about that. So yeah, I guess I'm wondering what your impression is on, like, how far this can go. Like, do we get to the point where states can just, like, tell the federal government no?
Yeah. I mean, that's what the architect of the SB 8 law essentially told the court, is that they don't have jurisdiction, and all the laws that they had passed in the 1800s are actually enforceable, and the federal government has no authority to stop them. And there, the 5th District and SCOTUS has indicated that, no, maybe you are right. Maybe that is the correct way to interpret our Constitution. So I feel like all of that, all of our decades, centuries of figuring out what the law means for this country is just up in the air. And we may be looking at laws now that are just more and more bizarre, as long as, you know, the GOP and the right have control over so many bodies of our government. It really is, I can't even fathom. I don't think we can predict what's going to come, honestly.
I mean, I'm also wondering, to put it crudely, will legislators in states that are currently committing, because we have seen a number of states, California kind of leading the pack, committing to maintain access to abortion and other forms of reproductive health care that are being threatened right now. Do you feel like you have a good chance that they are going to back you, especially in the event of, you know, laws that would potentially open people like you up to criminal charges just for trying to support people in getting, you know, reproductive health care outside of their state?
Is your question, do we think that elected officials that are pro-choice are going to back us?
Yeah. Do you, like, it's entirely possible that we're going to see some sort of federal law that not just criminalizes abortion, or even, like, prior to that, criminalizes aiding people in seeking abortion outside of states that have banned it, right? Like, that's on the table. How does that change the landscape for you? Do you suspect that, like, in kind of a similar way to how some of these, like, the legislators in states trying to ban abortion have said, like, we're just going to ignore federal law if it contradicts our state law? Do you think that pro-choice legislators in states, you know, like California, are going to be willing to go to the mat and protect you? Or are we, I mean, yeah, I guess I know this is kind of an unknown, but I'm kind of, these must be conversations that y'all are having, right?
I mean, I really freaking hope that they are. And if they're listening, please prepare to do so. And it's been really heartening to see states like California and Oregon and Illinois and New York and Connecticut, for instance, come up with really clear language around their support of not just choice, which was the language of the past, but abortion, and are saying that and are starting to invest in things like abortion funding and travel to themselves actually, you know, put forth their own efforts to contribute to the people who will need to travel into their states. And, you know, Diana was just speaking the other day with a bunch of elected officials in Chicago. So I think this is also why what I was talking about earlier in terms of orgs like ours coming into the light is so important, is that we're going to need those relationships with those politicians. We're going to need them to know us and see us and understand that we're a critical part of how we're going to serve their constituents. And that, we're going to need them to back us. Will they? I can't say definitively, but I really freaking hope so.
Yeah. And hopefully those, as Odile said just now, I was in a press conference yesterday. The mayor's office announced this fund to support abortion procedure funding and practical support. And my hope is with municipalities will talk to each other and give each other the models for doing this protective, preemptive support for people traveling to our states for abortion care. And I'm in with talks with the ACLU in Illinois to talk about potential bills that are floating around to even further protect abortion in this state. Specifically, I know of one that wants to explicitly protect providers from being extradited or sued or shut down by prosecutors in other states that want to claim that they have jurisdiction because, like I said, they figured out a way to give residency status to fertilize eggs or something,
I still can't get over that.
Just completely fucked
residents.
that's kind of what we're staring at, right? Like that's a thing that you have to be concerned with is like out of state law enforcement. I don't know, like, and that's the thing. No one knows what it's going to look like, right? Like we know that they have a vested kind of interest already in doing parts of this through bounties, which is kind of like the thing that I'm worried about. Are we going to see like out of state law enforcement bounty hunting people trying to hook folks up with reproductive health care? And I guess that's just kind of an unknown at this point, but it's
right. And it really depends on like our local protected state jurisdiction, like how far are they going to go to protect us from those entities that are going to try to come in for us. Just today, one of our staff members tweeted about practical support funds and who to support throughout the country that provides this sort of travel logistics help for people. And they got followed by a sheriff's department in Missouri.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So they're already, targeting and surveilling abortion seekers and the people who support them.
Yeah, and of course, I'm sure that there's a degree to which some of these folks are working with, shall we say, like non-state actors in order to do that. Like, I know they've been prepping with that for a while as well.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I know, because I've been having some conversations with friends of mine who are in, like, I guess we could say adjacent organizations to where y'all work and who are at, in some cases, the convention you were at, who are concerned that as providing people with reproductive health care becomes illegal, there's going to be a lot of fair weather friends kind of revealed. And I am interested, like, is this a thing that in order to be engaged in providing people with reproductive health care, you have to be willing to engage in illegalism at this point? Like, is that really where we are?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, as 501c3s, looked at by our state governments, our federal governments, we can't engage in anything that's legal. But people have forever, on their own, done things that the state has considered illegal in order to have bodily autonomy. There are people who can't afford it. There are people who are just so far from the nearest clinic that they can't even fathom how to make that trip. There are undocumented folks. There are people near the borders that can't even physically move past a border checkpoint because they're just trapped there and can't get care in other parts of their state where it's available. So that will be a thing. I think that is going to increase because the need will not decrease. And I do not, like, my organization can't really say anything about that, but
sure.
Personally, I'm like, you do whatever it takes to live your life and thrive. Laws are made up, especially now.
Yeah, that is nice to hear, because I try to keep abreast of the sides of this fight that are, working through 501cs and the like, and engaging in electoralism. The people who are, doing stuff like trying to figure out ways to provide access to like miso pills and whatnot to people, because that's just where we are. We've talked about the degree to which you guys have already been living in some people's future, just because of the specific nature of what your organizations have been doing, and the degree to which, you knew some of this is coming. What has surprised you outside of just like the fact that it got leaked ahead of time about kind of what we've seen in the last week and change?
I think I'm not so much surprised by the response from folks. I'm a little frustrated that it took this moment for people to realize what has been happening in this country for the past few decades. Honestly, this is a very long game for the antis, but ever since Trump was put into office and started just flooding the federal courts with very young, very anti-conservative judges. And SB 8 was a huge flag. But I think I was surprised that there was a mass amount of people that were going to step up when the decision came out. It gives me hope. I hope it's sustained for the many, many years we're going to need practical support and abortion funds while we fight for our legal rights. So I guess the surprise is a mixed bag for me.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that I think I've been pleasantly surprised at how well educated and informed a lot of our supporters and newer supporters are about, as Diana mentioned, the existence of abortion funds and practical support organizations. That practical support is even being talked about is huge. We couldn't get this conversation into the media a couple of years ago. So this is really remarkable and important. But what's more, there seems to be also a deeper understanding of why we have to exist. It doesn't seem to be shocking people quite as much, although there certainly are still tons of people who are shocked by this. But for many, they're not shocked that for some, abortion has simply been inaccessible and what those reasons are. And, that's thanks obviously to a lot of the really hard, important conversations that have been had over the last couple of years about racial justice. And I think that, it's a silver lining for sure, but I'm grateful to find that the depth of the conversations is there now. And hopefully that means that the commitment is going to be sustained and long-term, because this is a little bit of deja vu for us in the sense that we've had little moments like these ever since our organizations existed. When a single ban goes into place or is threatened to go into place, this swell occurs. I'm using my hands a lot, which obviously you can't see if you're listening to me right now. So I'm going to put my hands down. And that brings out a lot of really incredible donors and a lot of really incredible offers for volunteers. And then they tend to go away. And especially when Biden was, elected, there was definitely this moment where everyone was like, okay, we're cool, right? We're chill. Yeah. This guy hasn't said the word abortion, but we're still fine. And we're not. We're the furthest from fine. So yeah, again, pleasantly surprised that people seem to have a sense of why we're here.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring up that website, Did Biden Say Abortion Yet.org, I think.
One of our colleagues
just has a
made
big
that.
no. It's just it's so unfortunately hilarious to me, but I'm just really glad it exists. And then someone reached out to someone in the Biden administration to make a comment on this when the draft was leaked, and they said, well, we tweeted it or whatever. He said it once in a tweet and once in a statement or something. Oh boy. So I just think it's very funny.
Well, there you go. I don't know what more we want.
But I just think it's important to what you were saying earlier, how legislators in Oregon or California, it's so important they're saying the word abortion, not just pro-choice, because I think a lot of people are scared about that word for some reason, or it sounds scary to them if they're not that educated about what pro-choice means or what abortion means. So I think
Yeah.
I have a little bit more hope seeing more people even saying that word. Because it's
we really
not
have
just
to take it back.
pro-choice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the statistic is something like the antis have been using the word abortion 3 times as much as we have.
Mhm.
And that is why it's so stigmatized and difficult to talk about. And
Yeah.
I definitely try to encourage people to say the word abortion, to talk about abortion with everyone they know, just so we can stop hiding.
I guess kind of the last thing I'd like to ask, and we can cut this bit if this winds up not being something you want to get into, but have you felt an additional need to worry about, given how public you are in your advocacy, personal protection as things kind of have heated up?
We were recently at the conference that you mentioned before, and it definitely, with all of my colleagues in one place, it definitely made me feel a little vulnerable for myself and them. But honestly, the people who are targeted are the providers by far. I'm not worried about my physical safety. I'm worried about the physical safety of our providers, and the fact that our government is responding to peaceful protesters outside Kavanaugh's house and talking and asked for, I think, Susan Collins on the sidewalk outside her residence, results in legislation being passed to protect immediately. They all somehow got together for once in their lives to do something about the terrorists who chalked sidewalks outside legislators' homes. It's really demoralizing because our providers have seen violence, and they've seen violence almost every day.
I mean, murders, acid attacks, bombings.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, Shireen, do you have anything else you wanted to get into?
Yeah, I wanted to ask one thing. So, seeing the sort of increasing fecklessness of our politicians, even by their standards, and their response to this being, let's give more power to the U.S. Marshals, which is maybe
a great
the worst
idea.
Worst idea I've ever seen. But what can just people do about this? We've talked about like giving to abortion funds, but like how can people get involved, and how can people get involved in a way that's sustainable over the long term?
Yeah, definitely give to abortion funds, give to practical support organizations like the Midwest Access Coalition and the Bridget Alliance. If you are interested in volunteering, reach out to your local organization. There are a couple of really great resources for lists of those organizations and where they are, like the National Network of Abortion Funds. And you do bear with all of us because we are handling a flurry of emails, and that's incredible, but we won't be able to plug you in immediately. It might even take a little bit of time. But then I think that, voting is still critical, especially in any local elections, especially if we're thinking about how we're going to prevent the possible criminalization of abortion seekers and of abortion providers. We need to make sure that we've got good judges and good local elected officials at the very least. So do not stop doing that. I think those would be the things that I would say focus on. And the thing that I always say, which is just like, talk about it. Like, I am totally that person who is like the downer at the dinner party talking about abortion, but be that person and go and talk about it and share why it's important and how it's not just about abortion and it's not just about women. It's about families, it's about parents, it's about queer folks, it's about immigrants, it's about minors. We've got a lot to be worried about right now. So don't stop talking, listening, reading, consuming, whatever you can.
Yeah, and just to jump off that, if you are in a safe state, you're not going to be safe forever. They're going to come after us. They're going to come after the legislators, the Supreme Courts of those states. They're usually a thin margin as far as conservative versus progressive judges on state Supreme Courts. So find out who your local org is that is leading that voter turnout to make sure that people are voting for the right judges to go in. And also, I want to lift up escorts. Escorts are on the ground many days of the week. They will put you to work, and they're going to be needed more and more.
Yeah, I think that's all very important and a good note to end on. Does anyone else have anything else, or are we should we let y'all get back to your very important work? And thank you again for making the time for us.
Absolutely. Thank you for covering this and talking about it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Happy to do so. We'll be continuing to do that, and I hope you all geez, I don't even know what to say. Like I hope you I hope you fuck shit up for the people who are fucking shit up, you know?
We'll try our very, very best. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I hope the support doesn't like dissipate as like the trend goes away or whatever, you know? I think that's so disheartening if that happens. And like hopefully the flood of emails not necessarily remains a flood for you, but like I hope that people are actually serious about doing something. And I think this time they might be, just because I keep being surprised about little things. So I'm not going to expect anything anymore. Maybe people will surprise me.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate the work you do. So thanks for coming on to talk to us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the Sixth Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the Sixth Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveler said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. he became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Talk to your Zoom H6 about crack cocaine abuse. Some amount of crack cocaine is perfectly normal for a recording device to use. It is part of the recording industry. But everyone can overdo it, and if your Zoom H6 starts not reading cards or, for example, stealing from you in order to pawn your stuff to buy more crack cocaine, you might need to do an intervention. This has been Robert Evans, and a public service announcement about the Zoom H6 handheld recorder. How's that? Are we good?
Yeah.
Is that a good way to introduce a podcast?
What podcast? It depends on your answer.
That's a great question, Sophie. Scholars have debated for decades which show this is, but personally, it is the opinion of myself and a large body of researchers at Oxford and Cambridge that this is It Could Happen Here, a podcast about how things are falling apart and how maybe put them back together one of these days, figure it out. I'm here with Garrison and Chris. How are you guys? How are y'all doing?
Just absolutely splendid.
I'm extremely excited that every time I leave Twitter, there's a new mass shooting.
There was like 20 past weekend. It's been a lot.
There have been quite a few mass shootings in the last 48 hours, and there's a non-zero chance there's been at least one between when we record this podcast and when you listen to it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be flippant. That's just a reality. So I think we're going to talk about the two most recent ones, one of which was the mass shooting in Buffalo, New York by a 4chan motherfucking white supremacist, very much patterned after the 2019 8chan shootings, particularly the Christchurch massacre. And then the day after, I guess it's not technically a mass shooting because only one person was killed, thankfully. But there was a shooting that was certainly an attempt to be a mass shooting because he attempted to close the exits and stop people from leaving at a Taiwanese church in Southern California, which was stopped by the congregation before nearly as many people could get killed. It appears to be, it's just come out, motivated by nationalist hatred of Taiwan by a Chinese man. That's the broad understanding of both.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that. But we should probably deal with them chronologically. The Buffalo shooting it's one of those things. I made a big chunk of my bones as a journalist in the field that I used to spend most of my time reporting in, covering the 8chan shootings. And after every one of those in 2019, I had an article within about 2 hours. I haven't written anything about this one. I don't plan to, because there's not much to say. It is what we've seen before. I know there's some debate over how much of the as there should be, over like how much of the manifesto you can take at face value, which is none of it, and as to whether or not there might be something more going on here. But it is kind of my opinion from the information we have that this is the kind of attack we've seen before and the kind of attack we will probably see again more than once before the year's over. You know, this is someone who was radicalized primarily against the immigration or the existence, really, of people who are not white in the United States, and believes that the best way to cleanse the country of people who are not white is to carry out mass shootings that will radicalize other people and that will lead further to the breakdown of civil society in the United States by pushing at kind of like hot button issues like gun control. In order to further, it's an accelerationist sort of attack. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing here.
Yep. I mean, it's, yeah, like we said, it's very, very much riffing off of the Christchurch. I mean, at least over half of his manifesto was like specifically ripped
plagiarized,
from the manifesto, which of course that manifesto itself was ripped from a lot of other manifestos. It's kind of this just series of like launching mimetic language from one shooting to another, just kind of compiling into this massive conglomerate that's all based on trying to convince more people to do the same act. That's really, that's why when people are like talking about this and people try to limit the attention on the manifestos and that kind of stuff, because it's all crafted specifically to get other people to do the exact same thing. It's filled with memes, filled with in jokes, full of like in group out group stuff to convince people to kind of go down a similar path, and all of it's carefully crafted that way. The one really interesting thing about this is that there's not only manifesto, but also like almost 700 pages of diaries that he posted as well. And logs from like from a long time, tracking his inner thoughts, but also like, again, he posted it and he knew he was going to do this. So there's no telling how accurate that is. It's all in this package that he wants to present to people. So a lot of the nitty gritty is not even worth talking about in a lot of cases.
No, and I'm not. I think there's, broadly speaking, things you can learn. And I'm also, to be clear, I'm not against researchers studying, and I think it should be, absolutely. I am against just finding a thing in there and like posting it. Like when I made my post, I was pretty careful to note a couple of things that seemed consistent based on other aspects of the, like, things that he claimed about his radicalization that seemed consistent with what we were seeing. Like, he noted that he was primarily radicalized online. That seems plausible to me because of how fucking online the manifesto is. And it's one of those, folks are not entirely wrongfully bringing up the fact that the Great Replacement white genocide sort of conspiracy theory that seems to have motivated this fellow is basically identical to shit Tucker Carlson says. That's not relevant.
That's not what radicalized him, though.
That's not what radicalized him. Yes. This is not a dude who was watching Fox, right?
That's something I've been frustrated by looking at the discourse, because yes, obviously Tucker shouldn't be talking about this because he's normalizing this very rhetoric that you find in these manifestos, but he did not find this from Tucker. This is like it's a whole different ballgame. And when there's that conflation, I do find that to be slightly frustrating.
And some of the problem with discussing this is the problem with discussing basically any of these attacks is that the mass media coverage of it is nearly always going to flatten it to a degree that works in the favor of the people who are using this as propaganda of the deed.
Yeah.
And we can talk about maybe are there ways to deter that, you know. I've definitely, that's something that I've spent a decent amount of my career kind of struggling with. It's a tough thing to do because one of the things that's very frustrating that we've seen in the wake of this attack, and that we see in the wake of basically every politically motivated attack, is a whole bunch of people from a whole different bunch of belief systems and sides immediately trying to spin it in order to push the narrative they think is useful for the attack to have. And some of them believe legitimately what they're saying. Like I think most of the people who are like, this is, you know, Tucker Carlson's doing, are generally just folks who have not spent as much time in the fever swamps as we have and see, oh, Tucker Carlson's talking about this guy carried out a shooting. They must be related, right? I don't think that's wrong, but I don't think that's malicious. And then you get folks who are malicious with it, right? Like you have
all the Azov Battalion stuff is
the folk, right? One of the narratives we've seen form, particularly from what I like to call the shithead left, is folks being like, well, there was a Sonnenrad, the black sun. It's a Nazi occulty symbol. People who are more nerds about Nazis will even quibble with that, but that's the broad strokes of what it is. And it's a symbol that's definitely on some Azov gear. It's also has been on a bunch of shit well before there was an Azov battalion.
Since the 30s, since the 40s.
Yeah, it's all over the fucking place. And the reason he did it, the reason he had a black sun on some shit, was not because of the Azov battalion. In fact, he talked about wanting to break up NATO a bunch, but it was because the Sonnenrad was on the chest of the plate carrier of the Christchurch shooter.
Yes.
Yeah,
but there's all
and he's
of
a
these
big fan of the
people-
Christchurch shooter.
There's all of these people who are like, authoritarian left or whatever, who are being like, oh, how can Americans condemn this attack when this guy is using Azov imagery? And there's no telling how genuine they are with this. Like, there's no telling if they actually know what they're doing, or if they're just being like, if they're purposely misinformed or what's going on. 'Cause, like, it doesn't matter, but.
Yeah,
frustrating.
my assumption with those folks is that they are doing it because if you are a competent paid propagandist, you want to always be pushing the narrative in a way that furthers whatever it is your job to push. And if your job is connecting Ukraine to every bad thing that happens and a mass shooting that has nothing to fucking do with Ukraine or the Ukrainian government, if you can connect it back to them, then you're back in your wheelhouse, right? Because maybe you're not so strong talking about the fact that you and some of the people around you have been friendly with fucking Tucker Carlson, and he pushes a similar narrative to the one this mass shooter used. Maybe that's uncomfortable. What is comfortable is saying, no, this guy who did this bad thing is tied to these other bad people who are tied to this group that my entire career is about attacking. That's a much stronger position to be in, if you're, a propagandist. It's just like you see folks on the right who don't want to grapple with the fact that this was a right-winger who carried out a terrorist attack based on an ideology that even motherfucking Ben Shapiro has pushed elements of. You don't want to deal with that, so you call him a leftist because...
We saw the same thing with Christchurch.
He made a couple of vague... He's not a leftist. He repeatedly identified himself as right-wing and as a fascist, as a Nazi, as an ethno-nationalist. But he made like a couple of vague comments that they're taking out of context and being like, see, he was on the left.
Which he wanted to happen.
Which he wanted to happen. That's why he put it in there, right?
It is all part of the bit. It's all this... It's all of this like irony poisoned thing that they do on purpose to give anyone a propaganda out or give anyone a propaganda in.
If you'll remember,
we've seen it before. It's not new, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, in the Christchurch Manifesto, Tarrant said that he'd been radicalized by Candace Owens. Who's like a person who says a bunch of shitty, fucked up stuff. I don't like Candace Owens, but like had nothing to do with that guy's radicalization, right? Like that's not where he's fucking coming from. But he did it because he wanted to, because it's shit posting. It's to muddy the water. It's to get people it's to reduce the ability of people trying to grapple with what has happened to accurately see what has happened and accurately identify the problem and respond to it.
A big motive for this stuff is to cause this kind of social and discourse chaos, right? They want people... They want everyone to be confused, and they want everyone to be fighting each other and disagreeing on basic terms, right? Because the whole point of this is to like encourage gun control legislation, which will get the right mad, which will cause people to be more willing to do mass shootings or to do attacks against government, right? It's all part of very basic accelerationist like talking points and tactics. So the confusion's not accidental. It's all intentional.
No. I think a good way to look at this, if you like fighter planes and helicopters in a combat zone will have a type of countermeasure they will launch if someone's shooting a missile that's like a tracking missile, heat-seeking or whatever at them. It's called chaff. And it looks to the missile the same as a helicopter does. So you shoot a bunch of these out and the missile goes and hits something that's not the fucking helicopter, but to its sensors looks like a helicopter. That's what they're doing. They're shooting out chaff. They're getting you to like box with shadows rather than potentially landing a blow against like the central problem. And the central problem is not an easy one to grapple with without all that stuff around it, right? Because the issue here is how the way in which the internet enables radicalization, the way in which online communities are prone to radicalization, the way in which the conservative media and aspects of like just basic American history play into this specific people who want to do violence in this way for this reason, which is why the cops don't notice them even when they're on their radar, which is why that like the warning signs don't get spotted. And the ways in which, I think more than anything, the ways in which the internet has created a perfect incubation chamber for radical violence. And that is one of the stories here, right? People are focusing on gun control, which this guy bought his gun in the state of New York, which has the most restrictive gun laws in the country. Was more relevant, even if you're on that end, is this guy was deeply involved in like tactical Reddit. This guy was heavily involved in tactical videos and training videos and talking with other people about the best weapons, the best ways to use them. And if you watch don't watch the video, but he was competent. He engaged competently. He maximized his ability to do damage. He took out somebody with a gun who was attempting to stop him. The stuff that he did to prepare tactically worked. And the kind of tactical chunks of Reddit, of the internet, which are not all right-wing, but a hell of a lot of them are, and a hell of a lot of them have gone in very scary directions in the last couple of years. Not only do I suspect contributed to his radicalization, but I can say certainly contributed to his ability to effectively kill people.
Yeah, I mean, he had like over 5 pages just on what helmet he picked out. He had pages on what socks he was wearing, which is for multiple reasons. It's 1, to make the actual act more effective. It's 2, to inspire not like discourse like this, but also to get people to replicate what he did. Right? It's crafting all of these symbols that people can replicate. Be like, oh, he picked out these socks. That means I'm gonna get these socks.
I'm gonna get these socks.
Right? It's all this branding thing. We should take a break, and then I want to come back and talk about some mimetic language stuff.
You know who else can give you good advice on socks?
Oh, boy. All right, here's ads. Okay, I want to talk about some mimetic language stuff, because this was all heavily riffing on, and I specifically use the term riffing, off of the Christchurch shooting, which itself was riffing off other stuff, right? But he went so far as
the Christchurch shooting was a copycat shooting of the Anders Breivik shooting, or at least descendant of whatever term you want to use. Yeah. But that's what inspired the Christchurch shooting.
And it's... I mean, he was for the Buffalo shooting. He was testing out different live streaming platforms. He was doing all this stuff to craft a very specific image, and like images are very powerful. We've talked about like meme magic before, if we want to get silly about it. But he was very, very much involved in crafting these things that could be replicated visually. That's why he wanted to live stream it so bad. It's that he just the same way Christchurch was, and this is like really important for why we don't share this type of stuff, and why we specifically clamp down on this style of propaganda, and why we really encourage people not to share it, not to look at it, not to do that stuff, because he does in the few parts of the manifesto that he did write. He did say like watching the Christchurch video was very impactful for him, which I don't disagree with. I'm sure it was. He did
changed
great
the course of my life. Yeah,
he did great lengths to recreate it. And this is why people who are like researchers and people who kind of try to handle this kind of stuff in their time on Earth are so particular about this. Like I think last year, like a year and a half ago, there was this film company based in New Zealand who wanted to make a Christchurch film, and they were going to film a recreation of the shooting, but they said like, oh, but it's to show the horror and to show the impact it had on the victims. Doesn't fucking matter. It matters zero amount, because once you put that language into cinematography, you are giving them basically ammunition to help create propaganda, which will get more people killed. This is why we see the same thing on fucking Roblox. We see people recreate the Christchurch shooting on Roblox. It was actually a major problem, like a year ago specifically. It was a huge problem of people recreating the footage inside this game engine. And it's a very powerful tool that they use to spread around. It's targeted specifically people ages 12 to 18. This guy was 18 years old. He was heavily involved in online gaming. He was a really heavy Reddit user specifically. He loved Discord. So these are the places where it spreads even more so than 8chan now.
I would say and called him like a 4chan shooter because number one, he definitely was familiar with Pol, and number two,
he was on there.
He announced his live stream there. I do agree with you. Reddit was a bigger part of his radicalization, I suspect, and Discord probably, and I suspect he did purposefully minimize the extent to which conversations on Discord were part of his radicalization journey. In particular, that would be my assumption at the moment.
But for countering this type of rhetoric and this type of propaganda, right? Because they're trying to make themselves look cool. They're trying to make themselves look tactical. They're trying to They're trying to make themselves look like they're in a video game. Make it look like they're in a movie, right? They're trying to be cinematic. Like he was testing out different cameras. He tested like a GoPro. He tested out his phone camera, right? Trying to get a specific look. And we just talked about how he was tactically proficient in some ways, but in handling this type of thing, we have to. When we're crafting counter stuff to make this thing less likely, we need to not even focus on that. We need to make them look stupid, make them look juvenile, make them look like they're pathetic, make them look like they're stupid and silly, like they're LARPers. That's
one of the things that saved God knows how many lives at kind of the high point of the 8chan shootings in 2019 was that fucker in Hull, Germany tried to carry one out and got the piss beat out of him by a dude at a mosque.
Yeah.
And was photographed the next day in court, just covered. It's like beat to shit. That image probably saved some lives.
They want to be cool. They want to be mimetic. They want to be spread around as a symbol. And we need, like, culturally need to, yes, this is obviously very scary. This is a very real threat for many people of color, many black people, many Muslims, people of different religions, Jewish people, queer people. But we need to, when specifically crafting rhetoric and propaganda against these things, we need to make them look pathetic, right? That's
yes.
what it needs to be framed as. Because if you make them look scary and competent, that's actually going to make these things worse. Because they love that, right? Like if you film it, if you do any kind of like movie about the Christchurch shooting, no matter how you shoot it, they're going to love it. If you're showing people in pain, they want that. They want that. That's what they're looking for. You need to specifically frame this as these people LARPing and these people being pathetic and people being terminally online and having bad social skills. Like you need to frame it in this way that makes them look not desirable, because their whole point is to craft this desirable and visually stunning propaganda. And I think, yeah, that's I've been thinking about this for the past day or so, because there's just been so much. But like, identifying these people isn't the problem, right? Like this guy, he was talked to by counselors last year because they were afraid he was going to do a school shooting. Like there was a lot of the red flags and stuff, and like he was talked to by people before this happened. Like he wasn't an unknown factor. He wasn't an unknown of the vector to be this a person that can do this. But there's no way. People are good at finding these people before they do it, but we're bad at actually stopping them from doing it once we find them. There's really no power to stop it, and interrupting any kind of radicalization pipeline is really hard. So it's more about laying the groundwork to make the pipeline look pathetic, so it's harder to happen again. But always countering this stuff is frustrating, because if there was a good strategy, we wouldn't be here.
Be deeply. I want to move on to the
it's time to
in
move
California.
On to the next one.
But at the end of this, to close out, be deeply suspicious, if not outright contemptuous, of anyone who posits a simple solution to these shootings, whether that solution is gun control, whether it's expanded police powers, whether it's fucking arming everybody so that they can shoot shooters. Anyone who proposes a simple solution to this is a deeply complicated problem, because we let a number of horrible, obvious problems go on for way too long. And the solution to this will be painfully, agonizingly difficult and will take time. And there is not a simple, all-encompassing way to deal with this. One of the things that you can do right now to better prepare yourself to potentially deal with this problem is take a Stop the Bleed course, carry an IFAK and a gunshot wound kit as often as possible. And that continues to be my best immediate advice to people, because that there's no downsides to doing that, and it could and does save lives in other shootings. All right, let's move on.
In other news,
the next shooting. Yeah. Hooray.
Yeah, okay. This is a weird one. And I think the thing we need to make clear up front is that this happened yesterday.
As of time of recording.
Time of recording, details are still emerging, and it's weird. There's a lot of potential to so for people who don't know, a Presbyterian church in California was attacked by a Chinese guy. This is a Taiwanese church. It's mostly senior citizens, and okay. So there's a few important things up front that people should probably understand about this. One is that so Taiwan is ruled by military dictatorship for like basically the better part of the post World War II period. It is ruled by a military dictatorship run by the Nationalist Party, the KMT. The KMT is extraordinary in this period. It is extraordinarily violent. They assassinate people all over the place. They kill people on American soil. They train death squads in Latin America, and they're known for the sort of vehement anti-communism. But eventually, they're sort of toppled by revolution. Isn't quite the right word, but as the KMT as a party is still around today, and is one of the two sort of major, like, Taiwanese political parties, but they're not like they're not exactly the sort of death squad mafia party that they were through most of the 20th century. The sort of progressive forces that worked to overthrow the dictatorship, a lot of them coalesce into a party called the DDP, and one of the things about the DDP is, and there's a lot of sort of complicated Taiwanese political stuff here, but they are very, very closely connected to the Presbyterian Church in a lot of ways. And this, I don't know the specifics about this church, but there is a very strong connection between, and then the DDP are, okay, pro-independence is putting it too strongly, but if you're a pro-independent, like you want Taiwan to be an independent country and you don't want them to sort of like either continue, well, okay. This is the problem with Taiwanese politics. It's enormously convoluted. There's a lot of stuff going on at any time, and people are going to get mad at me for the implications I'm making. But yeah, the short version of the story is that the sort of anti-CCP, pro-independence forces and the sort of like progressive movement is sort of lumped into the DDP, and those are the people who are getting shot.
Yeah.
Because again, there's this very strong connection between Presbyterian Church and the DDP. And the KMT, who, again, I mean, okay, they've had an extremely complicated relationship with the Communist Party over the last 100 years. It's incredibly baffling, but they've basically swung around towards being more favorable to China. And there are some extremist factions of it that support unification. What seems to have happened here is, okay, so the shooter's family seems to have been like deported from China to Taiwan, and he like did not like it in Taiwan, and this is where it starts to get very murky. The police statement we have says that it's about sort of racial, like it's anti-Taiwanese animus, but that can mean a lot of things. And yeah, this again, I keep saying it's murky, and it's because it's genuinely murky. There's a chance that this is one of the things that's been happening since the Hong Kong protests is a solidification in mainland China of sort of anti-Taiwanese sentiment as sort of lumped in this sort of like nationalist anti-Hong Kong thing. There was a hardening of rhetoric against Taiwan, but also there's a lot of people in Taiwan, like especially KMT hardliners on the hard right, who like really, really, really intensely hate like the sort of the sort of progressive anti-CCP pro-independence people.
Sure.
And and this is something we don't know what his affiliation is.
He was like in his his 60s, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is weird because like there's a lot of things that could be true about this because of how old he is. Like, again, I mean, he is around when the KMT is straight up a death squad party, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it could be that. It could be he's sort of like independently radicalized. There's been some like rumors might be too weak of a word, but there have been some kind of sketchy reporting that like his ex was leaving for Taiwan and that may have played a part in it. But violence between the KMT and people who don't like the KMT is a thing that there was a very large amount of in the U.S. for a lot of reasons. And even though the KMT is sort of like, their alignment to China has like flipped in the past about 40 years. I don't know. I'm really, really desperately hoping that this isn't going to set off. There's already been a lot of, especially around Hong Kong, there's been a lot of physical violence, like people attacking each other at protests between, for example, people who support the Hong Kong protests and Chinese, like CCP nationalists. But this is something different, very weird, very embedded in the Taiwanese context, and I don't think we fully understand what's going on here. The other thing again is like this guy, he lived in Taiwan, like he was speaking Taiwanese, like when he was essentially like going into this church to infiltrate before he shot everyone. So like this isn't like this isn't, and I think people are reporting it like this because they don't know what's going on. But like this isn't a case of like a guy who is from mainland China who like decided that he hated Taiwanese people. Like this, he was there. He speaks Taiwanese. He like understands the Taiwanese political situation very in depth, which presumably is why he targeted the specific church. But other than that, it's the motives are still kind of murky. And this is the other problem with it, which is that like the sheriffs, like there's no way that the sheriffs have any idea what they're looking at. Like they've apparently reading his personal notes, and it's like, I don't trust their analysis of it.
Good Lord, no.
Yeah, like these.
If you weren't here, we would have to find someone else who understands that conflict in order to talk about it. I don't feel comfortable like trying to figure out or analyze that guy's notes. I sure as shit don't trust some fucking sheriff's deputy to do it. Like
yeah, this stuff is like, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't know. I will say like this I think was like the worst possible scenario for like what that shooting is about, because this is a kind of violence that was really intense, like right after World War II, and sort of like, and there's been periods where, like, yeah, I mean, people have gotten killed here, but it hasn't been that violent in a long time. And I don't know. I'm hoping this is just one guy who had a particular grievance, who I don't know, like, was pushed by sort of external factors. But if this is a sign of like, if this is a sign of sort of anti-Taiwanese like national, well, okay, so there's one other thing that we need to talk about, because that's unclear, because there's two kinds of potential like right-wing Chinese nationalism at play here, and it's unclear which one's happening, because there are people who are right-wing Chinese nationalists who are like pro-CCP, right? But there's also a kind of like it shifted, but there's also like a KMT nationalist based right-wing Chinese nationalism, which favors sort of like reunification with China, but is not the same thing as the sort of mainland nationalism, and has its own particular like very local political grudges, like with the DDP and with the sort of like progressive movements in Taiwan. And I don't know, anything beyond that is kind of like trying to figure out which one it is. Like, we just don't know unless the police actually decide to like show us this guy's notes, or like give us recordings of what he's been saying. We're not gonna know. And maybe by the time this is out, like there will be more stuff. But right now it's very muddled, very bad. The fact that this guy also, I think, was an American citizen, but was born in China, has gotten every like even the Chinese media outlets are saying extremely weird stuff because they're confused by it. So it is a muddled mess.
I mean, and
everything about this last weekend's been muddled. There's been so many different mass shootings this weekend.
Yeah.
There's been people being paranoid about copycat mass shootings. Yesterday there was reporting that a gunman entered a church in Buffalo that was not actually true. It's someone in the church yelled like there's a gunman or something, or like get the gun down or something, and it caused people to create this kind of rumor, but that there wasn't actually someone with a gun. It was this someone was like reacting to the sermon that was being had. But yeah, everyone's been super paranoid about every stuff, all this kind of stuff, as they should be. So sorting through all this stuff is very complicated and not a great time, because it's not fun, and we shouldn't have to do it, but it sucks. I do think it's also worth noting that the police did not stop. I know specifically they did not stop the one in the church.
Any of them.
A pastor hit
him with a fucking chair.
Yeah,
hit him with a steel chair.
And then they hogtied him with an extension cord, and then the police came,
which is
so
dope. I'm sorry they were ever in that position. But
they should never have to be in that position. But it turns out more and more people are having to do stuff themselves because
it's not also the first time that a mass shooter has been stopped by someone hitting them with a chair. If I'm not mistaken, that's how the Gifford shooter was stopped eventually, or part of how he was stopped is somebody fucking decked him with a chair.
It's it's really useful. It's really useful to have something beyond just your limbs.
Yeah. If someone is trying to shoot you with a gun, ideally you get away. But if you can't get away, trying to hit them in the face with something heavy is certainly a choice that has saved a number of people's lives.
God, what an absolutely dog shit country.
It's not a great I noted earlier, anyone trying to sell you like simple solutions, and I mentioned gun control on that, which is not to say that like the outrageously easy, how ridiculously easy it is to get any kind of gun in this country. Obviously, that's a factor in these shootings. My hesitance to take gun control as if you'll forgive the term, magic bullet to fix any of this is, number one, the sheer number of guns that are already propagated. Number two, the fact that a lot of gun control measures boil down to making it harder for poor people to get guns, and neither of these shootings seem to have been poor people shooting up folks. And just also the fact that while some states are capable of passing additional gun control, number one, New York's basically done everything it's constitutional to do, re restricting gun ownership. And federally, Biden and their Dems can't protect Roe v. Wade. They're sure as shit not going to pass any federal
and that's specifically what these people want as well. Like they're specifically doing this to get this stuff started so that it increases political tensions.
Whether or not to agree with my fundamental claim, you don't have to. You can believe that if gun control were to be passed, it could be the solution, but it's not gonna be. And so, like, as regards those of us trying to survive, we have to look in other directions, because you're not going to get an assault weapons ban. It's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, the one good, I don't want to say good thing, but it has been nice to see people slowly dropping the whole like lone wolf terminology.
Yes, that is a positive development, because these are not fucking lone wolves.
It's not a lone wolf. It's part of an intentional effort to cause these things to happen. The groups may be decentralized, but they are not lone wolves by any stretch of the imagination.
They are decentralized and acephalous, but they are deeply, deeply sophisticated and connected.
Yeah,
just not in a way you can drone strike easily.
Well,
yeah, and I think
I would have some target suggestions, Garrison.
Anyway, get an IFAC. Do stop the bleed.
Get an IFAC. Do stop the bleed.
And don't feed into their propaganda in the ways that they want.
Don't feed into their propaganda. Organize with folks in your neighborhood.
This sucks.
Yay! Okay. Well, kids, adults, boys and girls, and individuals of non-binary or other gender identities, cats who happen to be listening in, Airwolf, the helicopter, if you're listening in, everybody, every sentient creature listening, I do believe that things can get better. So part of that is not letting the crimes that the things that these people do, like part of the purpose of an attack like this is to make people feel hopeless and overwhelmed It's to blackpill you, to utilize some of their terminology. So the way to fight against it is, among other things, if you're talking about immediate things you can do, go out and do something nice to help people.
Yeah, and I would say, like, as a sort of like one brief last note, like, yeah, like in Taiwan they overthrew the dictatorship, and it turns out people stopped getting assassinated by the KMT in American soil. So, overthrow your governments, and you too can make peace with your enemies.
Yeah. Yeah, overthrow your government, overthrow another government. It's all good. It's all good, baby.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the 6th Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant. This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to It Could Happen Here, the podcast about things falling apart and sometimes have become put them back together. Today, it's me, Garrison, Chris, our producer Sophie, and Andrew joins us once again.
Yay! I love that guy.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Hi, everyone. Welcome
Hello.
to another episode of Andrew talking about whatever he feels like talking about. Okay. Today's episode, I am happy to announce that I finally finished Dawn of Everything by Dick Graeber and David Wenker. It took a while, you know. There were some points in time, some weeks that just went by where I didn't even like make a dent. Life got in the way and stuff, but I finally finished it. And now I get to talk about it and say, you know, with some authority that I've read Dawn of Everything. You know? Yeah, it's a very dense book, but it was 100% worth it. I mean, there's some critiques that I've been digging into by some authors in the field. And so I highly recommend people look for critiques as well, not just, you know, taking it and consuming it wholesale, but in addition to those critiques, like armed with those critiques, such as by people like What is Politics on YouTube, and also a couple academic writers as well, I think you could get a lot out of the book, and I certainly have.
Yeah, this is a very good book, and I'm excited to talk about it because I read it it was a while ago now. It's like 5 months ago or something.
Oh wow!
I've been like
I feel
needing
ashamed
to
now.
talk about it. I've been like waiting for the chance.
I've been picking up bits and pieces of it, but unfortunately, my book list to get through is way too long at the moment, so I've not been able to actually dive fully into the text itself. But it is definitely on my list after I get through my 20 other books I need to read for my job.
Yeah, it's a lot. At least we get to read books for a living. Or something
indeed.
adjacent to that. And I mean, it is a difficult book, I would say, to like discuss in its entirety. And I don't intend to, not to read any parade or anything, Chris, but I don't intend to talk about the entire book, you know, because that's like several hundred pages.
Yeah.
You know, and each chapter covers like so much. But I actually wanted to talk about chapter 4 in particular, where the authors explore the concept and the origins, in a sense, of cultures in one particular segment. I mean, there are a lot of mysteries of the Upper Paleolithic that we don't know, right? I mean, that's why they're mysteries. But, you know, we've come to learn, you know, through the course of the book that, you know, this assumption that everything was just these small, tight-knit bands, and that was just the entirety of the human social arrangement until states, you know, at least it's new to the layman to realize that this is not necessarily the case, you know, that there is a lot more political, structural, you know, diversity in that time period. We don't know at that point in time, you know, what languages people were speaking. You know, of course, linguists have been able to like reconstruct like proto languages and stuff. And I mean, I'm just a hobby linguist, just like I'm a hobby everything else. But I think it's been really cool to see how linguists are just able to do that. Like, can we just take a second to realize that like linguists are able to take scraps of existing languages and just kind of piece them together to get a sense of like how they're related? Like, how do you all do that? But there's a lot we don't know, right? We don't know about their language, we don't know about their myths, you know, their conceptions of the soul, what their favorite foods were. I mean, we know they ate, but we don't know what like Joe Skeleton thought about his breakfast that morning. But what we do know is that, you know, from the Swiss Alps to Outer Mongolia in the Upper Paleolithic, people were using a lot of the same tools, playing a lot of similar musical instruments, carving similar, rather interesting female figurines, wearing similar ornaments and conducting similar funeral rites. And there's also reason to believe that people actually traveled a lot more than we would expect them to do, and actually traveled longer distances than we would expect for that time period. I mean, we don't have they didn't have rather, like cars or chariots or trains or planes or anything like that. So to think that these long distance journeys were occurring, places like Australia or in like North America is just really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I was wondering if you can talk about, like, one of the things I thought was really interesting about this is the way that they talk about culture areas, where you have these
Yes.
you have these like very large, I mean, like almost like half continent sized areas where people are speaking similar languages, or like the same language, and you have these like these clan structures that are like, you can go from Missouri and you can end up in like Mississippi, and you'll be in a place where they still have like, the sort of like 4 basic like clan lodges are still the same, and you'll meet people who are like from your clan. And he has this really interesting line about how, like, sort of counterintuitively, like, the world's gotten, like, even when there was like people spread over geographic distance, like the world sort of got larger as technology progressed, and not sort of like smaller in the way that people sort of think about it, because like in I don't know, instead of there being these sort of like mega like culture areas, you can go from one place to another, and there'll be people who speak the same language, and you can sort of slot into the like systems that are there. You suddenly have this like incredible diversity of stuff.
Right. So I mean, specific to like North America, where you had all these different clan structures, we usually tend to think of these groups as, and especially like your immediate relations with people that, it's like close kin, family, that kind of thing. But there's actually, at least in some studies of hunter-gatherers, there's some suggestion that their composition can be quite cosmopolitan. So, you have these groups, and biological relations might only make up a small percentage of like total membership. They're actually drawn from a wide pool of individuals over a larger stretch of area. I know not all of them even speak necessarily the same first language. There's this YouTuber, indigenous anarchist YouTuber named Twin Rabbit, and he had this excellent video. I need to rewatch it, on Plains Sign Language, which is this method of communication that indigenous Americans used across, the plains to conduct trade and diplomacy and discussions, even if they didn't share the same language. In Aboriginal Australia, people were able to travel halfway across the continent, moving across people who spoke entirely different languages, and still find, camps that had people of, their same totemic moiety, and those people were to be treated like their brothers and sisters, so like no hanky-panky, but, they had this, cross-continental bond of like hospitality. From the Great Lakes, to Louisiana bayous, you could find settlements of people speaking entirely separate languages, unrelated to their own. And yet still, you will find, bear clans or elk clans or beaver clans that were obliged to host and feed them, and we could only really guess as to like what kind of systems were like, and how those systems might have worked 40,000 years ago, in the Upper Paleolithic. But what we do see with the, similarities in material uniformities and stuff of these different tools and musical instruments and stuff suggests that there might be a bit of a similar system in place at that time. Roughly around like 12,000 BC, we start seeing like new pottery, getting dropped. We're starting to see the outlines of more specific cultures in specific areas. New stone grinding tools, new ways of preparing and eating wild grains and roots and other vegetables, different ways of chopping, slicing, grating, grinding, soaking, draining, boiling, and storing, smoking, and preserving meats, plant foods, and fish. And so then we start to see something that really brings people together, and that is cuisine. And cuisine, being the birth of cuisine being the birth of like really more specific cultures. The kinds of soups and porridges and stews and broths, and basically what they were talking about was the way that people who like wake up and eat fish stews every morning tend to, develop a different sense of themselves in relation to their world compared to people who might wake up in the morning and eat some porridge with like berries and wild oats. And then from there they start to develop different tastes in clothing, in dancing and drugs and hairstyles. I remember later on in the book, the Davids point out that some indigenous Native American groups were actually known for specific hairstyles. And I kind of knew that based on the fact that, we tend to associate Mohawks with people, Mohawk hairstyle, Mohawk people. But I didn't realize that, other groups also had their own kind of like culturally specific hairstyles, right? And there's also like courtship rituals and forms of kinship and styles of rhetoric. And so, of course, you still have these large cultural areas in the Mesolithic, larger than some nation states, but you're starting to see a bit more specificity and a bit more diversity in shorter spans of area. If we look at now, for example, where, we have in the Amazon all these different languages and cultures that coexist merely kilometers from each other, I think the overall trend of human cultures, over the past tens of thousands of years has been the opposite of marginalization. And it makes me think a bit about the whole concept of the nation state and how it tries to like bring people together to this like one narrow conception of what it means to be, XYZ, and how humanity naturally seems to like resist that and naturally seems to like split off from that. Like even when you have situations with the forceful spread of English in, the Caribbean colonies, you still see like a diversity springing up with a bunch of different unique creoles and dialects, making the language something different. If not for the enforcement of language standardization through the, school system, I think we would actually see an even more rapid explosion of, linguistic diversity developing out of these creoles and dialects. Like a couple centuries from now, Patois and Trinidadian Creole and British English may be entirely incompatible. Even in Britain itself, you might have a case where London English and, Sussex English or whatever starts to sound like entirely different. And you already have that with accents, but just to see how, even in short spaces of time, as short as a century or two, because, for example, Trinidad was not always an English-speaking colony. We actually spoke French Creole for most of our history. And only in the 19th century did we have that period of Anglicization, where English was, brought in. And to see that in that short space of time, in that handful of centuries, that, Trinidad already has its own unique English-based Creole. It's just fascinating to see.
There's something really interesting to me about the way this process plays out, because it's almost like, okay, so you have this sort of like you have this period in what is the Mesolithic. All the period names are blanking out of my head, but like 40 years ago. Yeah, so like you have this period where you have kind of like you have a lot of cultural standardization like spread across a long period, like a bunch of places, and it's used sort of as a mutual aid thing. It allows people to travel because you can go to a place and know that like there will be people who are like you there and they will take care of you. And it's interesting to me. It's like, okay, so this breaks apart as sort of like these new cultures, like as people develop local cultures around like food and around just like, Graeber has this thing that he loves talking about, that he's been talking about for ages, called schismogenesis, which is like you have two people. It's like I think his original example is like you have two people who are arguing with each other and they like disagree minorly over like one thing, and then by the end of the argument, like they've taken like completely mutually opposed identities to each other based on like an incredibly minor disagreement. And you get this with you get cultures that sort of like define themselves against each other, and like they have things that they like and things that they don't like. And it's interesting to me that you see the state trying to sort of like reimpose that kind of like 40,000-year-old cultural homogeneity on all of these places that are like incredibly not homogenous. But they're doing it for like the opposite reason. They're doing it because they need standardization in order to sort of like make their bureaucratic like systems work better and make their sort of like
seen like a state kind of thing.
and also like I mean this was a huge thing. Everyone in the late 90s and early 2000s thought that like the extent of capitalism around the globe was going to make everything exactly the same. There's only going to be one culture, and that like kind of really didn't happen. But there was this real sort of, I don't know, like there was this real sort of fear that it wasn't just going to be the nation state spreading like homogenization, but that, like capitalism was going to sort of like spread homogenization. And I guess the thing that they wound up doing instead was like figuring out that you could just sell everyone into their individual cultural niche, which
to some extent, because like we see a McDonald's in the US and a McDonald's in Bangladesh and a McDonald's in Japan, and they sell all of the same McDonald's stuff, but they've also like sort of specified to their, specific country.
Yeah, we have the worst version. The US has the worst version of it, by the way. Like Taiwan has one that has like they have like rice sticky rice patties. It's so much better than the US.
Yeah, I mean, I will say though, if I did end up traveling to Taiwan, McDonald's would probably be the last place I would want to go.
Yeah, we wound up eating there, and we had to catch a plane, and so we wound up eating like
Taiwanese McDonald's.
Yeah, that's Taiwanese cool. McDonald's airport food because we had like 5 minutes. It was
you know what they say about airplane food. But yeah, that's exactly what I was about to get into, actually, the whole idea of cultural differentiation, and this tendency that humans have to subdivide and to distinguish themselves from their neighbors. And I mean, it's natural to assume that, this differentiation comes from like differences in like language, with language splitting off over the centuries and people associating with their native language and ethnicity, but that don't really tell the full story. Like, for example, in Northern California in the early 20th century, the ethno-linguistic map had really a jumble of languages that drew from entirely different language families, as distant from one another as like Arabic and Tamil and Portuguese. And yet, these groups still shared, broad similarities. How they went about gathering and processing food, their most important religious rituals, how they organized their political life. And they also managed to keep themselves distinct. You had the Yurok and the Hupa and the Karok and so forth. And I mean, to some extent, these identities did map onto linguistic differences, but their neighbors who spoke different languages still had more in common with them than people who came from their same language family in another part of North America. Of course, European colonization had like a severe impact on like how Native Americans were distributed. But we still tend to see this trend of how like these modern nation states, they weren't around at the time to, order populations into these neat ethno-linguistic groups. This idea that the world should be divided into these like homogenous units with their own history and everyone has a claim to like a certain territory and all that. It's really a concept that is born out of this mythology of the nation state. And, of course, we have to be real careful before we project those kind of uniformities back in time.
Yeah, it's stuff's only really like 200 years old. Like it's pretty young.
Yeah, exactly. But there are some concerns, with the concept of culture areas, because that whole notion of culture areas came out of North American museums who wanted to arrange their stolen artifacts to illustrate their theories of the different stages of human adaptation, like lower savagery and upper savagery and lower barbarism and so on. And so they had to determine whether they were going to organize these artifacts based on like language family or regional clusters, or some sort of like traced history of ancient migrations, right? Eventually they realized that, this way of organizing into regional clusters seemed to work best, where the art and technology of different Eastern Woodlands tribes had some very similar things in common, compared to like trying to group people based on like, say, the Athabascan language, or all the people who relied on fishing, or all the people who cultivated maize. And they were able to find similar patterns in the Neolithic villages of Central Europe, finding these regional clusters of domestic life and art and ritual. And so like this whole cultural area concept was kind of a way of pushing back against this way of, talking about human history that like ranked populations into higher or lower anything. This idea of claiming that, people were of a certain superior genetic stock and had reached a certain advanced level of technological evolution. And so rather there was a shift in anthropological focus to look at the diffusion of more cultural traits like ceramics and sweat lodges and, the treatment of young men or certain sports. And so they wanted to try to understand how these different tribes of certain region came to share this mesh of culture traits. So one of the people who were thinking on this, whole culture traits cluster idea was a guy named Boas, right? And he wanted to figure out why it is that like geography seemed to define the circulation of ideas, with like mountains and deserts forming these natural barriers, and how basically the diffusion within those regions was basically historical accident. Other people were hypothesizing that there was some sort of like way to eventually develop a kind of a natural science, developing how and even predicting the ebb and flow of styles, habits, and social forms. And eventually Marcel Mauss pulls up, and he basically like writes a bunch of essays on nationalism and civilization, and he says basically this whole idea of cultural diffusion is nonsense because it's based on a false assumption. And the false assumption is that the movement of people, technologies, and ideas is some sort of rarity, something unusual. Instead, Mauss argues that like people in past times traveled even more than people do today. And it's just that when these people interact with people of other cultures and they see their cultural traits, they reflect on that and find a way to relate that to their own cultures, right? So like people who were traveling back then, obviously all of them, were aware of basketry, or featherworks or whatever the case may be that other people were using a couple miles away. Same to be said for like certain drum rhythms or certain, games. Or like, for example, he spent some time focusing on the distribution of the ball games around the Pacific Ocean, around the Pacific Rim, from Japan to New Zealand to California. And what he realized is that whether people pick up certain ideas, certain traits from other cultures comes down to how they want to be defined against their neighbors, against their closest neighbors. The question becomes less about why certain culture traits spread, but why other culture traits didn't. Because if you're aware of all the things that your neighbors and stuff are doing, all these foreign customs and arts and technologies, we know that the Silk Road, for example, even if we talk about the Silk Road, we had a Silk Road going from China all the way into Europe and all across the Silk Road, all across Central Asia and West Asia. And despite that constant, sharing of ideas, not every idea that, came from China or came from Persia, or I don't know if Persia was around during the Silk Road, but you know what I'm saying? Like, not every idea that was along the Silk Road everyone necessarily picked up on, even if it was a technology that might have benefited them. Because cultures effectively structures of refusal. So, for example, there's this guy on YouTube, Religion for Breakfast. He did a video recently on the pork taboo in certain cultures and certain religions, right? And one of the things he pointed out was that the taboo tends to be strengthened in times of like repression. So, for example, or in times of cultural definition. So, for example, he was pointing out that in the period of Roman conquest, the Jewish people were more inclined to define themselves as, you know, against the consumption of pork compared to the Romans. You know, for example, the Chinese are the people who use chopsticks. You know, they don't use knives and forks. So you're the Thai are the people who use spoons and so on. You know, it could just be said that, you know, it's like aesthetics, like styles of art or music or table manners. Of course, those things won't differ. But even like technologies that have like certain adaptive or utilitarian benefits might still be refused by people who might even benefit from them. Like, for example, the Athabascans in Alaska refused to use Inuit kayaks, despite the fact that they're a lot better suited for the environment than their own boats. And the Inuit, for example, don't use Athabascan snowshoes, at least in the time that Marcel Mauss was writing. And then, of course, this is a self-conscious process. You know, this is a process where debate and discussion of all these different customs would have been occurring. You know, for example, in the Chinese courts, when different foreign styles and customs would, you know, come into the lands, there would be debates and arguments put forward by, you know, the kings and their advisors and their vassals, you know, discussing, you know, whether they would ride the horses or drive chariots or adopt like the Manchu dress codes and customs. And so societies, Mao said, live by borrowing from each other, but they define themselves by the refusal of borrowing than by its acceptance. The question of how culture areas form and how cultures split off is definitely a political one. The decision to adopt a certain form of agriculture or to cultivate a certain crop more specifically, or to adopt a certain style of dress, it's not just like a matter of like mere utility, of mere or caloric advantage or material efficiency, or it's also a reflection on a questioning of the values that that group of people holds or purport to hold, who they consider themselves to be. I like to think about the development of cultures, you know. I like to think about how our ancestors or distant ancestors even considered themselves. You know, it's easy to just fall into this trap because it's a very common cultural trope that, you know, once you go before the invention of writing or whatever, all of our ancestors are just like ooga booga cavemen kind of thing. But to think of them as self-conscious and politically conscious, politically considerate, thoughtful actors, not, you know, static or passive props. It's just, I think it's just very cool. I think it's very cool. And I think that we should keep, you know, these developments, this recognition in mind as we, you know, in the modern time, look to try to transform the cultures we live under and to try to develop new values of like anti-authoritarianism and anti-capitalism and of, you know, a greater priority on mutual aid and on egalitarian social relations.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of very interesting political consequences of thinking about this, because like I think that there's sort of like two tendencies that we sort of get stuck in when we think about like our social structures, which is there's one which is the sort of like, I guess it's called like capitalist realism, which is the assumption that like nothing else could possibly, like, this is the only system that works, nothing else can possibly exist, and that's unproductive. And you know, you go back and you look at like any other culture or society, and it's like, well, no, like there's like an unbelievable, like nearly infinite number of ways you can organize your society. But then I think the second one is that like, yeah, if you look at this sort of cultural diffusion and cultural refusal stuff, you see a lot of examples of people doing stuff that like under sort of like classical economic or like sociological laws they shouldn't be doing, right? Like there's no reason why you shouldn't use a more efficient canoe if you're in a place of the part of the world that's like extremely hard to survive in, right? And I think that there's this tendency to sort of like reduce culture, to reduce just all of the ways that our social and political systems function to these sort of like, oh, they're the product of these like abstract historical forces, and like it's all like it's all determined by technology and like how you farm and stuff. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that
not.
material conditions aren't, you know, very important in understanding, you know, how these cultures develop. And that's one part of the very thing that I found was a bit lacking. I think that not all the time those dots were clearly connected, I'd say. But I do think people put too much stock in solely material and materialist explanations, and that kind of ends up precluding or leaving out the more messy human realm of explanation.
Yeah, and I think part of why this happens is that like it's much, if you assume everyone is like behaving according to historical forces, or like the thing that they're trying to do is like maximize they're trying to like maximize their utility, or they're trying to like maximize the amount of calories they have. That's a very easy thing to like think about numerically, right? Like it's a very easy thing to refuse the numbers. It's extremely difficult to refuse the numbers, like to reduce to numbers a society that is like, I'm going to intentionally make my life harder for myself because this is the way we do things, and we've decided we don't want to do things like other people, or we've decided that we have some kind of political value that we have that makes it such that we're going to like induce difficulty into our lives. And like that, I don't know, like that kind of stuff, the fact that culture is not just a sort of like superstructure that gets that's like a product of like some kind of economic base, like that is very important, and something that gets ignored or downplayed constantly. That I think I think you can argue that Dawn of Everything like maybe goes too far in the other direction, but I'm sort of okay with that, just because we've been so far on the side of like everything is historical forces for so long that you need something to remind people that like societies make conscious political choices, and not only have they made conscious political choices for like tens of thousands of years, like we also can make conscious political choices that are not just sort of like pure reflections of like however many tons of iron have been extracted, and like what percentage of like workers are currently working in hospitals versus like making cookies or something.
Right.
Thank you for that OOO analysis, Chris. Really, I agree. That's a joke like 12 people will get. I love you if you understand that joke.
Also, I'm sorry.
Yes, you could wrap it up, Carson.
All of this has been very fascinating. What I've learned the most is that I need to finish reading all my books so that I can read The Dawn of Everything. I know I got it from my dad for Christmas because I knew that it would be at least I think I did. My memory I could actually be wrong. I could have only intended to get it for my dad for Christmas and then forgotten to actually get it. But I've been meaning to both buy it for myself and get it for other people because I've heard a lot of interesting things about the book. So it is definitely on my list. It's been a pleasure listening to you'll discuss it. Andrew, if people want to check out more of your work, where could they go about that?
Right. So you can still find me on Twitter at _SaintDrew when I'm not hiding. And you could also find me on YouTube, Andrewism, youtube.com/Andrewism, where I post videos about also stuff, random stuff, that I'm thinking about, politics, history, all that jazz.
A few days ago, as of time of recording, Andrew put out a wonderful video on solar punk stuff. I have no idea when this episode will air, so it's probably been like a month or two or something. But definitely check out the Andrewism channel. It's one of my favorite spots to watch something when I feel like I can't put any words on the page. I go watch your things because it's very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that does it for us today. You can find us at on Twitter and Instagram at HappenHerePod, Cool Zone Media. You can find me posting about hyperobjects and liminal spaces at Hungry Bowtie. And I heard that you have a Twitter, Chris.
Yeah, it's at itmechr3. You can find me mostly complaining about other people who are doing communism wrong. I guess that's most of what I post about.
Love that for you.
You too will be able to differentiate between the 16 different... Actually, that's not even true. There's not even 16. There used to be. Long ago in a galaxy far, far away, I made a decision, and that was that I was going to sacrifice my brain to understand the different kinds of Maoism. And if you too want to understand why it still exists and all 20,000 varieties of them, go there. If you don't want to do that, do not. You'll be happier.
Well, what a ringing endorsement. Goodbye, everyone. Go, I don't know.
Oh, should we plug the other shows that we have?
I guess. Everyone's tuned out at this point. I hope they've all stopped the podcast player. Okay. So I think
Esco will be free.
Yes, go outside and be free. There, you can edit that into something that is more concise.
Sorry, Daniel/Ian.
I don't care.
Hi, this is Jo Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the 6th Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant. This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the podcast It Could Happen Here, but for once, it is not about the world falling apart. It is entirely about putting it back together again. And joining me to talk about putting it back together again is zero of the other people who are normally on the podcast. But I'm joined by Shannon and John Hieronymus, who are part of the team of organizers working on the Dual Power Gathering. Shannon, John, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Hey.
So I guess the first part of the Dual Power Gathering is dual power, and I think we should walk through what actually that is and what our sort of visions for it look like, because, I mean, I know we've talked about this on the show before, but that was a very, very long time ago, by which I mean, like, probably only, like, 7 months, but, you know, feels like ancient history. So, yeah, I guess, do you two want to talk about what dual power is and how to do?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to stop trying to think about what happened 7 months ago, and I can try to have that option. Okay. When you said that, I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. No, never mind. So dual power. John, how about I go ahead and share with our audience what is sort of the poetic language that we have up on the website from the organizers, and then we can kind of like break it down and talk about it.
That works for me.
All right, so the website text is such. Dual power is a way to imagine the moment just before our movements converge, as the possible becomes the actual, when the seeds of social transformation we have sown for generations bloom, when the old world begins to wither and new worlds can be born. It is a way of thinking about how we got to that moment and beyond it. Dual power is the project of building self-determination, mutual aid, solidarity, and direct democracy in our communities by creating spaces that empower us all and from which new emancipatory institutions can emerge. It's so pretty.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
So what does that mean? First off, I want to say, like, give a shout out to a lot of people have been working on this vision of what dual power is for years and years now. And that includes a lot of groups that we are either in conversation with or have been taking inspiration from. One of the biggest, I think, most developed groups that's doing that work is Cooperation Jackson, Mississippi. And I think the goal is people went out. Oftentimes when people hear dual power, if they don't have any other context for it, but they are maybe from the left. They've heard about this moment in the Russian Revolution when there were these two competing, bases of power in Russian society while they're undergoing this revolutionary change. And Lenin wrote a pamphlet about it, calling it The Dual Power, and looked at it as a thing that needed to be overcome by, workers in Russia to establish a workers' state, which it kind of outlined in a book called State and Revolution. But when we look at what they were describing, we kind of look at this as a thing that emerges in any time when there's a social revolution kind of unfolding in a society where you have various classes who are changing social relations. So workers, peasants, different groups of people who have a class, have come together around a class interest and overthrowing their oppression. And they have to go through stages of building their collective power, their collective identity, their and their kind of overall strategic movement in a particular direction. And they create this tension between the existing state order and a newly emerging social revolution that's challenging and overthrowing that power. So that being said,
go ahead. We want to ground that. We want to ground that a little bit in a less historicized context or whatever. We could say maybe that's the work that we're doing to build up the institutions and relational structures that we need to care for ourselves and each other as we move through sort of different states of institutional organization in the society, right? So when we're thinking about how do we meet our basic needs together in ways that are not dependent on the oppressive institutions that we're trying to overthrow, we're talking about dual power.
Yeah. And it's anytime working class folks, and I'd say in a broad definition, communities, people who aren't necessarily working, but depend on taking care of each other, or who do the work of reproducing every, society, basically build their own independent power, to be able to fight back and to challenge the status quo. So there's a lot of things that are kind of percolating that we've been that have been happening in North America that takes inspiration from areas of the global South, but also our own homegrown traditions. So that could mean anything from your local mutual aid network to your local tenant union to a rank and file union of Amazon workers or teachers or care workers, whose existence puts them in conflict with the state capital and patriarchy, settler colonial relations, indigenous water protectors, folks who are building up places where the more developed it becomes, the more it kind of builds its own momentum, and you have spaces that are autonomous, fully autonomous regions from state power, and to begin to pick apart at capital and reconfigure our relations of how we make things and do things and take care of each other in fundamental ways.
And we have lots of beautiful examples of this from the organizing history not even that long ago, and people will be familiar with some of the Black Panther programs or some of the programs that were integrated into the farm workers movement, and some of the programs that were put together by the anarcho-feminists who were trying to support women's bodily autonomy and secure abortion rights through things like mutual aid healthcare and things like that. So we'll see there's a lot of really beautiful examples of this work happening over time around successful organizing movements. And we're all really excited about what's going on now. And we want to see that just to sort of come together and flourish.
I think it's important to think about dual power as something that's like, I don't know, like I think there's a lot of people who look at it as sort of like dual power is planting a garden. And it's like, I mean, sort of, yes, but like there's, you know, there's sort of two components of it, right? There's this sort of, there's a defensive component and an offensive component. There's a component that's about taking care of each other, and there is a component that is attack, right? There's a component that is the people who are preventing us from taking care of each other need to be stopped from doing that. And so, yeah, I think it's important to, think about different kinds of institutions that you would not normally think of as doing the same thing, as being part of the same struggle. And yeah, I guess that brings us to what you two and a lot of other people have been working on for, God, this has been in the works for a long time. Yeah, which is this dual power gathering. And yeah, I guess you two want to talk about what that is, because
sure. Yeah, well, you know, we've all been sitting around the past couple of years dreaming about being together. And so I think this is kind of the fruit of that dream, right? Coming up at the end of July, we're inviting everyone out to the Indiana Dunes for a camping trip. And during that time, we're hoping to see a collaboratively produced event that incorporates everything that the participants can bring to it, which we know far exceeds the sort of even the scope and vision of the organizing body. So we're, I think, really trying to just create a space for people to come together who are interested in these ideas, who have various levels of experience working with it that will be valuable to everybody, from people who are brand new to this stuff and just want to learn more about it, to people who have been doing it for years, for decades even. And yeah, that's sort of the underlying ambition of it, is to get people together in space. So, you know, a lot of us have been to these kinds of events before and felt like the most important thing that we got out of that was the relationships that we were able to build and the people that we were able to meet, that we could then carry on ongoing dialogues with, and that we could find inspiration in those dialogues and in those connections that would birth new projects that, you know, we don't yet know are even possible. And so this is kind of, at least for me, like that's the really important and exciting force of the plan.
Yeah, I think that like they're cool. Some of the things about this I think are really like, it's been like really a collaborative effort to come up with this thing. Like we had the discussions about this is a thing that we thought needed to happen, because at the end of by the end of the middle of 2021, we were like, look, clearly we've all been through so many different experiences over the last 10, 15, 20 years at this point. Some of us are getting to be elders. And we need to it feels like now is an excellent, a really great time to have like a actual conversation about where we're coming from and where we're going, and how do we translate these experiences into like networks of like trusting relationships and sharing of all this knowledge. Is like, we need to debrief like the past 5 years, I think in particular, have been like, it's like crammed. It feels like, you know, the whole saying, like some years nothing happens, and some, you know, and some months, decades happen, paraphrasing or whatever. And it's like so much stuff has we've all gone through so many things and come to like, and we're seeing people who didn't have like maybe a stance on various political things, or are like seeing their communities torn apart by like the real lived experience of like climate change, and need to do something about it, that sort of thing. Like bringing in people who have lots of experience and people who have maybe are just now figuring things out, and really kind of like using and taking this as an opportunity to generate new knowledge, so that we're going to be like kind of like clarifying what we've gone through and where we're heading. And get people like in the same space who like I do a lot of union shit. So I'm always thinking about how do I get like rank and file union radicals in the same space as like a neighborhood abolitionist or a tenant union organizer or a community land trust, and getting all these like different groups because together, and then like thinking about how they overlap and support and build off of each other, because I think the operating theory of many of the people who are involved in this is that every context is different where we're organizing, but there are many kind of principles that can kind of translate across contexts, but the context will shape very I was just talking with one of the organizers who's like 20 minutes away over in Northwest Indiana, and you're like in Gary and, those areas, and their context for building something like an ecosystem of dual power organizations is going to be very different from my context, where I am like down the street from this big global center of capital that's like University of Chicago, and it's doing and my neighborhood's being gentrified by $2 billion corporations, and I've got a big nurse union. Whereas they're in the middle of like a community that's being actively divested and destroyed, just eaten away at by because capital is just pulling out and has been doing that for basically as long as we've all been on this earth.
At the same time, y'all are dealing with the same biosphere complications and climate change implications. And so, we're thinking about the ways in which the kinds of affiliations that make sense for us to be successful in our projects are they're not just local, they're not just national, they're not just continental. There's a lot of different things that are going on there. And that the only way for us to really sort out who we need to be in coalition with on any particular issue is to know everybody and to try to understand better their specific context and their specific experiences. And I think there's I think, to John's point about, how much has changed in the last, handful of years or whatever. I think one thing that we've all come away from is the pace of change is pretty humbling, I think we definitely all, we took in a bit of humility around that. What is it that we actually need to do? We are definitely not prepared for it, and it doesn't matter how many decades we've been doing this organizing work. We just are not ready for how quickly things are changing right now. And the only way for us to get ready is to make sure that we shore up and strengthen the networks of people that we can rely on to produce kind of positive interdependence as we move forward with the continued chaos that is the contemporary world.
Yeah. I mean, and then part of this is also thinking about, because the way this is structured, this isn't just a series of panel discussions where we've the organizers have curated, here you're going to listen to, so-and-so who's a prominent tenant organizer, or so-and-so who's a prominent, in climate change direct action work. The goal is that we specifically chose a format, and officially it's called an unconference. But the way I think of it is it's which comes out of tech, which I find kind of irritating, but the core of the idea of the thing is that we're coming into this space and generating new knowledge, not necessarily sitting there and receiving a bunch of knowledge from people who we designate as movement leaders or experts. That doesn't mean that people who don't have a lot of experience and a lot of skills aren't going to be there. It just means that we're going to be, because one of my things is popular education coming from the tradition of Paulo Freire and everybody learning together is it's taking those principles and kind of doing them in parallel in various circles, where there'll be a circle here of cooperative organizers or people who want to get co-ops off the ground. There'll be a circle here of people doing land trust work. There'll be a circle here of unionists. There'll be a circle here of people doing abolition work. And or people who are interested in all those things are getting those sorts of things off the ground. And as they work through they present, tell stories, share ideas, do debriefs on like the various things that we've all been going through over, how far back our timeline is, depending on how far, which elders decide to attend. But then taking that knowledge with our facilitators and then being like, you know what, I think that these two conversations are happening kind of like in parallel, would be better if they were merged together, and beginning to kind of like build that sort of like, and so the idea isn't to necessarily come away with like we're not setting up like a predetermined set of conclusions for people. We believe, and based off of, we've been having monthly community calls for people who are going to be attending. All the different groups of folks who will be coming to this is going to be, I think, like the depth of experience is going to be really phenomenal. And people coming from, we definitely have people confirmed who are coming from Canada, people who we may be having folks with experience in indigenous communities in Mexico. We may be having, I'm fairly confident we're going to have people who are like just come from areas like northern Syria and Iraq, and taking all these different ideas and experiences and then generating next, like coming to new conclusions, maybe unexpected conclusions or things that we didn't quite, that we weren't anticipating. But
maybe even asking new questions, right? Like this is a kind of, it's intended to be a prefigurative space for engaging with things where we don't know what the right answer is. And I think we all need to really sit with the fact that we do not have like a clear right solution to the problems that we're facing right now. Like I've been kind of pulling on the slogan a little. It's like, no gods, no masters, no right answers, just like get used to it. We need to be more creative and we need to be more open to experimentation. And, there's just a lot of stuff that's going to be coming at us fast. And, this is we hope this can be a space where we can kind of take some time to slowly get square with what it is we're going to have to be thinking about, even if we don't know what to do exactly yet. So
I had a really good experience where I was listening to like a person who came out of ACT UP, giving a talk in my neighborhood. And she was saying, because we had questions, is this going to be about a lot of theory? Are we going to be talking about a lot of abstract stuff? And this organizer was like, ACT UP had no theory, right? They took action and the theory followed afterwards. And so the idea that we're like necessarily coming to this with like the right answers already figured out is just not like something that I think is going to be a super generative discussion. The idea of coming up with orientations and thinking about like where we are heading kind of in a general sense, and then seeing how that unfolds and builds is, I think, a big key aspect of what we're trying to do when we come together.
Which is not to say that there won't be theory, because that's not up to us. That's up to y'all. So, I probably, what I'm really interested in is having conversations about like community mental health care, and like for me, the theory is less interesting than, like talking about what we actually need in the spaces that we work in. But that's, that's where I'm coming from, and everybody else is coming at this from their own perspective too. So I'm really excited to see what people bring to that space and what we can get out of it, by just thinking that we all are contributing something constructive to that conversation.
Well, and then also there's going to be a lot of discussion about like literal practical skills. Like, here's how you, this has always been the perennial thing. This is how you pick a lock. This is how you organize comms on a picket line. This is how you pull together a demand letter for like a list for like tenants. Like, these are the sorts of things that like we're going to be doing concrete skill shares, plus these discussions about our experiences and sharing our stories. And, hopefully we're going to come away from this. A big goal of it is to come up with a lot of like different like just like content. We're going to be recording videos and audio and like also, and then transcribing things and writing things up. And we're hoping that once we're done, we're going to have a big report that we can share out with people who can't attend.
Yeah, privacy concerns obviously considered. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
this is a very consent is a big thing with us as organizers.
I should hope so.
Yeah.
You would think, but not everyone is as down as you would imagine.
Okay. So basically, we're building a perfect little utopia for like 4 days, and y'all come out because we're going to fix the revolution. So, kidding, obviously.
On a more concrete level, like what does like a day here look like? Like what are we doing?
Oh, that's fun. That's a fun question. If I may, John.
Yeah, go for it.
What we're thinking right now, basically, is that a day looks like we get up in the morning, we drink coffee, we have breakfast, and we have a little assembly check-in to see how things are going, if we need to make any major adjustments, and we put up a sort of a schedule for the afternoon's events that was populated from the conversation that was happening in the evening the night before, and anything that anybody wants to bring up to that schedule that happened between yesterday and this morning. Then we're going to roll off into basically what would be some of the kind of like things we already know for sure that we wanted to see happening that we could get on a sort of schedule ahead of time. So some of these skill shares that were planned that would require kind of like pre-planning, or maybe some discussions that people reached out ahead of time that they definitely wanted to have. So that stuff would be happening earlier in the day. We're talking about having sort of just like sandwich bars and, make your own lunch kind of situations going on. There should be a lot of different things happening in different geographical locations on the site. So you kind of get a choice of where you want to go. It's not like there's one big event. We're going to try to group things that are sort of thematically similar so that they're nearby each other in case you want to go around and see what the different kind of stuff is going to be. And then in the afternoon, it's going to be like, okay, of course, this is like how we're intending right now. The afternoon would be the discussions and skill shares and events and circles and spaces that were generated out of the conversations that have been happening in the space, so that people came and thought, we had this conversation yesterday that really inspired me. Let's talk about this, and I'm going to make space for that. So we're going to have big map where you figure out where you want to go, and you're going to be able to wander around and meet people. We're trying to incorporate a lot of events that make it easier to meet other people that you don't know yet. Where there's going to be tables where you can do arts and crafts. There's going to be game space for whatever kind of games you want to play. There's going to be places for kids to hang out. There's going to be a quiet tent where you can take some contemplation time. At some point we want to do a kind of grief circle for people to deal with what they've been kind of going through in the world, and, some, utopia envisioning arts space, these kinds of things, like where, somebody wants to teach someone else a dance, like that's the kind of thing that we're really hoping can go on in the afternoon. Then we would be feeding everybody dinner. And we kind of had this idea we've been playing with that we would have 2 campfires after dinner. And at one campfire, we'll have kind of an open forum where anybody can talk for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever, however long people need who are there, depending on how popular that is, and just kind of air everything that's in their head. And we'll have a note taker so we can try to incorporate what comes out of those discussions into the next day's agenda. And so that's sort of like what we were envisioning. And then for the other campfire, it's people who don't want to do that.
Don't forget this. The other campfire for people who are like, I'm done with talk. I need to just sit and stare at some flames for a little bit.
Yeah.
And chill.
I imagine I'll be going back and forth between the fires. So, that's also an option. But the idea is to get kind of like somewhere between, I think, what were we calling it? It's like somewhere between a conference and a music festival. You know what I mean? Like, where you're able to sort of move around and you don't have to go and sit in one place and do like, okay, for this hour, this is where it's meant to be a bit more informal. And we're hoping that makes a lot more space for people to sort of explore and people to meet other people that they don't already know. I don't know if that sums up sort of like what I'm imagining, because that's like, that's the spirit. So I think if that's the question, like, what does the day look like? Well, hopefully it's fun. That's kind of the main thing we're thinking here. So make it a sort of low stress and low stakes place that we can talk about some of the highest stress and highest stakes questions that we have to deal with. So
yeah, and like that being said, like, because we're modeling it this way specifically based on people's experience with like the Symbiosis Federation's founding conference, that sort of thing, where there were a lot of stakes and people were trying to kind of like funnel different discussions through different ways. And this is not necessarily a critique of how that all went down. It's just like based on our experience and our experiences with those sorts of things. The goal is for this to be, if it's successful, the first of many of these sorts of things, many of these kinds of gatherings and discussions, and to provide a model for how it could happen. But to keep, we deliberately decided that we're not going to make we're not going to have a big points of unity debate and discussion and voting on assembly sort of thing. We will use assemblies for, certain things like setting up like our community agreements and that sort of stuff, and kind of like getting the days rolling and kind of getting the days closed. But the goal is to bring people into conversation who maybe don't have the basis of trust for those bigger collective discussions yet, but maybe they will later. But the goal is, for now, is we're building and expanding our networks. We're building and expanding our trust with different people, and building and expanding our knowledge so that we can go out and do the kind of work that we think we need to do to, survive as a species on this planet. So that's one of the reasons why, if there are some people who are like, oh, I don't know, this seems really kind of wishy-washy. That was a very deliberate decision based on previous experience from organizers who had been to these sorts of things. And the goal is really to have a place where we can have discussions about high stakes issues without being so invested in it that we feel like if our concept of how to solve that problem doesn't come out as the solution, that we've somehow failed. So it's
I was to say that I think one of these things that you brought up there that's really important is like, not even just in these previous conferences or congresses or gatherings that we've been to have we seen this be a problem, but basically, at least I can speak for myself, in a lot of organizing spaces that I've been in over the past 15 years that I've been pretty active in the organizing universe. Basically, that one of the main problems that we have with this kind of like space of trust that we definitely know that we need to be able to work together moving forward is that we don't really have shared language a lot of the time. And we think we do because we use the same words, but we often use them to mean different things, or we often use different words to mean the same things as well. And then we come from kind of different organizing cultures and a lot of different places, like that some are more or less, we should say that maybe that there are different places where you show solidarity in a different way. You show good faith and you show that you're committed in a different way. What it means to be democratic in a space seems different depending on the tradition that you maybe come from. So what we're really hoping to do is kind of make space to incorporate all of that. So I was joking, it was a camping trip where many camping trips fit, that there should be an opportunity for people to kind of like learn to talk past those barriers that we might have to understanding each other, and like that success would really look like people coming away like believing in other people's commitment to get this done, and with the kind of contacts that they need to support each other moving forward as things come up in different places, as opposed to just like, here's a solution, like here's a blueprint for how to get this done. That relationship that you have with a person who's had that experience in the past is going to be way more valuable than any document they give you based on their experience, because you're going to be able to say, well, shit, I wasn't expecting this to happen. Like, what do we do? And then you can talk through that with them. And like, I think that's really the foundation of our being able to share this knowledge with each other, is that we have the opportunity to kind of engage in these ways that are like more focused on the kind of just sort of dynamism of the challenges that we're dealing with right now. So
emergence is a big thing. Things are always gonna be changing. Like we need to be prepared to deal with a world that's going to be throwing challenges at us that like we haven't had solutions for. And like, because we're going through this like really kind of like catastrophic like moment of like climate change. And I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but like, and so it's just like engendering the idea that we're constantly evaluating what's happening around us, both like at our local level and across the regions and globally, and then taking new knowledge in and coming up with new solutions in a real in a truly experimental way, like thinking about things as like experiments and how we're going to like come up with new solutions to these problems. Because it's just, well, like as we kept telling people, because when we were out there trying to bring groups in, everyone's telling us our capacity, this sounds great, our capacity is incredibly low. And that has just been across the entire like spectrum of organizations.
Yeah.
And that includes huge, big put together organizations like, unions versus little mutual aid groups. Everybody is dealing with this like feeling of exhaustion and like capacity. Our goal is to get people together so that they can build capacity through these discussions and be prepared for things, because capacity is always going to be an issue. And our goal is to get people to this point where, because their mindset is, okay, new challenge, let's think about it critically and come up with solutions that fit this moment, as opposed to keep trying to force things into preset, like easy. I mean, I don't want to say easy, but like, I think that sometimes like everyone's trying to mine history for the one weird trick to solve all these problems. And I think that the one weird trick is that human beings are creative, critical thinking machines. Like our brain is like this thing for taking in information and generating new thought and action. And we need to embrace that. Because if we don't, I don't think we're going to be very successful.
Certainly in these times of just increasing uncertainty, that kind of humility and flexibility and like continued building of comfort with that uncertainty is going to be super essential to our being able to maintain even sort of like the basic ability to take action, I think. So we're going to have to like continue to to lean into that uncertainty and to sort of, I think, like kind of historically, the being comfortable with things changing and being comfortable with uncertainty is actually one of our great strengths, right? Because we can actually start to get moving while everybody else is still going, what the hell? And so I think, that's going to definitely be something that's going to serve us. And yeah, anyway.
I have one last question on an extremely practical level, which is like, what is the like facility situation here? Like what are people sleeping in?
So like right now we have camp space reserved for 200 people. And so we understand that camping is not always super accessible, but we are very fortunate that like the National Lakeshore has specific accessible facilities for folks. And we do have disabled comrades coming to this event, and we're working on making sure that those that their particular needs don't keep them from participating fully in the event. There's the discussions and circles themselves will be at like shelter space, a bit away from where the camping is happening. So we're organizing transport between those spaces. For people who cannot camp, we are working on organizing some hotel space for folks. And then for people who can camp but don't have any equipment, our goal is we're going to basically acquire like enough camping equipment for a sizable chunk of folks to come. And it's like literally today walking through Walmart with my daughter, looking at their camp equipment and pricing out things like sleeping bags and camp sleeping mattresses and tents, that sort of thing. So
yeah, if people have stuff they want to donate to the cause too, like I think we should be able to take some of that in. I think we were just talking yesterday about the possibility of having like camp gear repair zone. So if you have things that you find at the thrift store that are like a torn tent or something like that, we'll help you fix it. You know, we just want to make sure that everybody has these supplies as well, because they're broadly useful. I know I've used my camping gear in some politically motivated ways in the past. So I think that it's not bad for people to have it if you need it. Just saying.
Also, the camping aspect of it is also, it's more of a feature than a bug. Like there's like so to speak, like the pandemic is not over yet, as we're like seeing, right? In spite of everything that our ruling class is desperately trying to get us to agree to. And so having the accommodations outside and doing the actual events like out of doors where there's lots of ventilation, we think is like right now one of those events, so that we're not going to so that people aren't going to come away from this getting sick, which is really important. As a person who's recovering from COVID round 2, and as a healthcare worker, that was one of our big concerns, because we when we started making these plans, we really weren't sure what was going to be happening in terms of the pandemic, and having it out of doors was just like a surefire way that we knew that we could, at the very least, we could minimize the chances that people would be getting sick from just showing up and being in the same space together.
Absolutely. And we're definitely encouraging people who are coming together with friends and comrades in little groups to self-organize their camps as much as they would like to do that, to sort of make plans together to limit the the need for spaces, with sharing up tents and all this kind of stuff, which, to the extent that people are comfortable with that people. If you need to get in touch with people from around you, if you don't know anybody, you can reach out to us. If we know anybody else who's looking for somebody to try to coordinate with, we'll definitely put you in touch. That's something we want to be able to do, is like offer some of these connective services to help people kind of link up with people who are coming from their areas, or people who are interested in the same kinds of things. And so we're kind of thinking of ourselves in the organizing body as facilitators of those connections, and trying to like imagine how what we do will make those connections most likely to happen. So in terms of the facilities as well, I think we talked about trying to get some camp stoves together for people who need to use sort of a kitchen space, to try to limit the amount of things that people need to bring for that. But definitely feel free to bring your own stuff and set up whatever you need, and let us know if you need help from us. We'll do our best to accommodate that.
And people are getting fed. So we're planning on having meals arranged, and that'll be vegan, and with the caveat that folks who want to have separate food can do their own self-organized cooking, if that's a thing that they're really committed to. And we're planning on having all the necessities of lots of water, making sure that we've got first aid lined up. There's going to be street medics who are participating in the work of organizing all that, harm reduction, and just generally some of the other things that we haven't really mentioned. It's we know that we're bringing a bunch of people with a lot of big ideas and big personalities together, and that means we're probably going to have to deal with some conflict. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. So having conflicts, people who are good at mediating conflict, we're going to have a crew of people who do that. We're working on child watch training, because this is going to be a family-friendly space, making sure that we know how to take care of each other in case like shady people from outside try to do something, like whatever. Like our goal is to just make sure that like this is as safe as it can be, bringing people together, and as accessible as it can be, understanding the limitations of you're going to be outside, so there might be, you know, some of the fun of having like a collective group of people all outside together, which can be a lot of fun. In my experience, like I'm waiting for karaoke and for like our open mic and people bringing out like instruments and like just having like, you know, we've been discussing like you know, some soccer potentially being a thing, determining like placing bets on who's going to be more into soccer based on various ideological affinities and past experience. And
hit us up if you want to play some music, if you've got an idea for something fun that sounds cool to do. And just to circle back to this, I think like with the point about conflict mediation, I just want to make that like super clear. Just because we're not going to spend half a day trying to come up with community the points of unity does not mean we don't have expectations about how you act in the space. So our plan is basically to say, like, don't be an asshole. And then that means, you know, like in all the ways that we know that those things can happen. And then if somebody accidentally is being an asshole or somebody's are accidentally being an asshole, like those are things we can manage because we all know what it is that we're doing here. So it's definitely not a free for all, you know, this is a space where the normal things we would expect in space are expected, you know. Like, explicitly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, oh man, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to people. I don't know. I don't actually know how widespread bonfires are in the U.S., but we do a lot in the Midwest, and bonfires are a great time. I'm excited for people to experience that. It's great.
Love it.
Yeah. So I guess. Do you two have anything closing that you want to say? And also, where can people find this and attempt to go to it? And also, when is it happening? Because that's another important.
It's going to be July 29th through 31st. And attendance is free. There's no charge, but we are soliciting donations. So we're doing a fundraiser through Open Collective. And we've been very generously given an offer of matching donations from one of the organizers who got a little bit of a chunk of change to kind of contribute to that sort of thing. We're very excited about that. So if you go on to, you can follow us on Twitter, and I believe that's at Dual Power 22. Let me double check. I think it's at Dual Power Gathering is our Twitter, and
the website is dualpower2022.org.
Yes.
Yeah. If you go on the website, you'll find the links to everything you need to know. You can get in touch with us. You can give us your feedback. If you love it, if you hate it, if you whatever. We're probably not going to change the whole thing right now, but show up and we can change it at the time. So
I'll also say we do have like a organizing Discord, and people who are like serious about like getting involved and want to come to this and with things that they have specific visions for. Now is like absolutely time to get engaged with that, because we're working towards making getting people into the who are the participants to really own the event itself. So that'll be that's something we have. I believe we're going to do probably 2 more community calls, one in June and one in July. Every one of those calls has been really amazing. Lots of great people. And during those calls, we're going to be doing some training on, because you got to do some prep work when you're doing this kind of generative discussion, popular education, unconference style events, coming to them with a little bit of an understanding of what that looks like is really key to it being successful. So we encourage people who want to come, get signed up, and then you'll get into our mailing list. And our mailing list is where we disseminate like when those calls are happening. And you can also hop in our Discord. And as long as you're cool and agree to our community agreements, we would like bring you in and like get all sorts of shit together. And we're very excited for people to come in. There's still a fair number of slots open for the event itself. We're like almost halfway full. So
yeah, I mean, definitely we've been trying to think about this as an event that we would want to go to, and we want it to be an event that you want to come to also. So help us make it so.
Yeah, that's this is really exciting. I'm going to be going to it. Yeah. So yeah, thank you to you both for joining us, for talking about this, and I'm excited to see lots of people there.
Hey.
I mean, we've all been wanting to see each other for 2.5 fucking years, right? Yeah. So
yeah. I miss seeing your face with Dimension.
Yeah.
I'm sick of your flat face.
For real.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for having us on to talk about it. Really looking forward to it.
I mean, we're getting closer and closer. It's just like, it just gets more exciting and also a little nerve wracking, but thankfully a lot of people have been stepping up, and I'm confident it's going to be really like a really great thing.
Yeah. And we will have links to everything in the show notes. Yeah, this has been It Could Happen Here. You can find us in the usual places at Happen Here Pod and stuff. All right, goodbye. Have fun.
Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
Hi, it's Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And today I'm talking with my dear friend, Krista Williams.
It can change you in the best way possible. Dance with the change, dance with the breakdowns.
The embodiment of Pisces intuition with Capricorn power moves.
So I'm like delusionally proud of my chart.
Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we unpack the story of an unimaginable tragedy that gripped the UK in 2023. But what if we didn't get the whole story?
Evidence has been made to fit.
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
What if the truth was disguised by a story we chose to believe?
Oh my God, I think she might be innocent.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
In 2018, the FBI took down a ring of spies working for China's Ministry of State Security, one of the most mysterious intelligence agencies in the world.
The Sixth Bureau podcast is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to The Sixth Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd. In 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
But here's the thing. Bachelor fans hated him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
That's when his life took a disturbing turn. A one-night stand would end in a courtroom.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.